Cain lay defeated on the ground, bloodied and broken, as Abel stood over him, sword raised. Abel declared that Selvia belonged to no one, and that he was liberating her. Cain, in a desperate, guttural scream, demanded that Abel return her, asserting that she was his. Selvia, tears streaming down her face, offered a tearful apology to Cain, stating that she would now find happiness with Abel. Blood splattered nearby, a stark contrast to her sorrowful declaration. Meanwhile, a hooded figure sat before a computer screen, observing the tragic scene unfold. Abel standing triumphant over a fallen Cain, with Selvia by his side. The figure's thoughts drifted to Cain, lamenting that Selvia would now be with Abel forever. Abel, with fierce determination, proclaimed that he would protect Selvia and would never forgive anyone who dared to harm her. Below, a collection of beautiful girls, including Selvia, were depicted, suggesting they were all part of Abel's growing harem. The hooded figure expressed deep frustration, lamenting that Selvia, who was initially the main heroine, had been relegated to merely another member of Abel's harem. He questioned the unfairness of such an outcome. A grave marker, bearing the inscription "Dear Brother," stood as a silent testament. Abel's voice echoed, acknowledging Cain's strength but asserting that he never truly understood how to love people. The hooded figure, visibly distressed, pondered a major official SMS update and wondered if he would graduate in the final 10 weeks. A young man stared back at his reflection in a mirror, his eyes wide with shock and confusion. He touched his own face, questioning what was happening to him. He stood in a lavish room, still reeling from the sudden change. The hooded figure, his former self, appeared beside him, confirming his internal realization. This was a reincarnation, much like those often seen in manga and anime. The shocking question then formed in his mind. Had he, of all people, been reincarnated as Cain? He stood in a lavish room, his new body feeling unfamiliar, as a stern butler approached him, announcing his presence. His attention was drawn to the door as the butler declared that Lady Selvia, Cain's fiancée, had arrived. He reacted with a gasp of utter shock, his eyes wide with disbelief, as Selvia, a young woman with long blonde hair, became visible behind the butler. His eyes widened further, reflecting his astonishment, as Selvia burst into the room with an energetic, almost frantic, demeanor, seemingly apologizing for her sudden entrance. She greeted him, her hands clasped politely, as if surrounded by a shower of petals, her expression bright and innocent. He was overwhelmed by her presence, a flood of memories from his past life as a player rushing back. He recalled how Selvia, in the game, was his ultimate heroine, a character he adored, and the realization that she now existed in reality made her seem almost divine. His face contorted with a mix of awe and disbelief, while her radiant smile seemed to confirm her angelic presence. A true heroine descended. He attempted to compose himself, urging himself to calm down and assess the situation. He observed that Selvia appeared even younger than her game counterpart, and then a shocking truth dawned on him. Cain had been engaged to Selvia since they were 5 years old. He pondered the implications, recalling that the neighboring territories of Schwartz and Fernan had been destined for marriage since birth. He then remembered the lore. 5 years prior, Selvia had awakened to power, becoming the saintess of the world tree, a divine figure. Prince Leon, aware of this power, had then forced Selvia into an engagement with Cain, preventing her from using her abilities. He stood before Selvia, who expressed her gratitude for his renewed acceptance, her hands clasped nervously. Yet, a chilling realization dawned on him. This was an order from Prince Leon, demanding he drive Selvia to suicide. He recalled the game's original scenario, where Cain had relentlessly bullied Selvia for 3 years, culminating in the annulment of their engagement and her banishment from the royal palace. This was the fate he was meant to enforce. To escape such torment, Selvia, in the original narrative, would seek the aid of hero Abel. His father, a stern man, explained that while the Schubaltz family had initially accepted Selvia, the true reason for her engagement was to control her burgeoning power. Selvia, the saintess of the world tree, was destined to awaken her abilities, a power Prince Leon intended to exploit. The prince's plan was to have Cain bully Selvia, driving her into Abel's arms, which would then trigger her awakening. This entire scheme was set to begin with tonight's welcoming banquet. He vowed silently that he would never allow Prince Leon's machinations to unfold as they did in the game. As he processed this, Selvia, with a gasp of surprise, discovered a letter bearing the seal of a ducal house. He urged her to read it. The letter, signed by Leon Albion, explicitly stated that Selvia, the self-proclaimed saintess of the world tree and Cain's fiancée, was to be driven to suicide through relentless torment. It promised Cain the position of the next king's right-hand man if he complied. Selvia, visibly shaken by the contents, looked up at him. He, however, declared his absolute refusal to follow such a cruel command, vowing instead to protect Selvia. He resolved to overturn the game's scenario, determined to create a future where Selvia could be happy. He, the one who had created this game, knew he could change its course. Overwhelmed by his words, Selvia suddenly embraced him, tears streaming down her face as she sobbed his name. He gently apologized to her. He continued to comfort Selvia, gently stroking her hair, but the butler, Lancelot, arrived, reminding them that there was little time left before the welcoming banquet. Lancelot inquired if Cain had been with Selvia, then suggested that Selvia be escorted to her room, as Cain had important matters to discuss with his father. Cain, however, insisted that Selvia's abuse must be stopped completely. He clutched the incriminating letter in his hand. Selvia, now composed, confirmed to Lancelot that she would indeed attend the welcoming banquet. The butler, with a slight bow, asked if she required anything else. She mused internally, surprised that Cain, her older brother, would go so far to protect her, a feeling she could not quite recall. She descended the grand staircase, preparing herself mentally for the banquet, and paused to gaze at her reflection, steeling her resolve. She stood in a new, elegant dress, her gaze fixed on a document detailing the passion flower summoning. It seemed she was preparing for a significant event, perhaps practicing a crucial ability. Moments later, a surge of energy erupted around her, manifesting as a cascade of flowers. Her eyes widened in surprise, or perhaps alarm, as the power flowed from her. As she sat, cradling the summoned blossoms, the true nature of her abilities was revealed. This was the power of the Saintess of the World Tree. She possessed the capacity to summon and manipulate all manner of plants, including the passion flower, known for its potent sedative effects, which her power could enhance. The narrative then shifted, casting back 1 year to a grand castle, where Selvia's role in the Atlas Empire was already a matter of grave importance. In that past, Prince Leon, with a chilling smirk, informed a distressed Selvia that her engagement was solely for the prosperity of his kingdom, and she should consider herself fortunate for the arrangement. She recoiled internally, horrified by Prince Leon's intention to exploit the Saintess's power for war against a rival nation. She resolved never to use her abilities, believing that if she did not, she could not be forced into the role of a fake Saintess. Unperturbed by her distress, Prince Leon continued to mock her, stating that while she was beautiful, if she could not be his queen, she would serve as his mistress instead. Her face contorted in terror as a hand extended a goblet towards her, Prince Leon's voice echoing that accepting it would be the highest honor for a countess. Moments later, she lay screaming and crying in her bed, desperately calling out for Brother Cain. Prince Leon, now beside her, looked down with annoyance, questioning why she would utter another man's name while he held her. Her face was a mask of pure anguish and fear, her screams echoing the depth of her despair. Prince Leon, his face contorted in fury, held her down, demanding to know if she intended to mock him. He swore he would make the fake Saintess regret her defiance, his grip unyielding. She sat alone, reflecting on the meaning of the letter Cain had sent to the royal palace the day before, confirming it had been properly delivered to her brother. As she read the elegant script, Cain's heartfelt words echoed in her mind, a solemn vow that no matter what transpired, he would love only her, forever. Meanwhile, Cain's father confronted him, demanding to know why he had defied Prince Leon's command to accept Selvia into their family. He dismissed Selvia as a mere fake Saintess, unworthy of the opportunity to curry favor with the future king. Cain countered, asserting that Selvia still possessed the potential to be the true Saintess of the World Tree. He reminded his father that history recorded instances of the power awakening after 10 generations or more. His father mused on Cain's words, while Cain, a calculating glint in his eyes, internally plotted. He believed that if Selvia were pushed to the brink, her powers would awaken, and bringing her into the Charbart's family would bring immense benefits. Cain further explained that the game would begin in 3 years, and the current political stalemate between the Itmad Kingdom and the Empire was precarious. He revealed that his father was absent from the game's future narrative. He then emphasized the Saintess's power to control the world's fate, warning that if her power was mishandled, the Empire could face ruin. Therefore, he asserted, the Charbart's family must monopolize this power. His father acknowledged the logic in Cain's plan. Cain challenged his father, asking if he intended to remain subservient to the royal family indefinitely. His father, taken aback by Cain's audacity, warned that such defiance could lead to the complete ruin of their house. Cain, however, dismissed his father's caution as a short-sighted gamble, declaring that a new era was dawning. Cain's father reacted with disbelief, demanding an explanation. Cain then revealed his discovery, a mithril mine located within their own domain. Cain stood before a massive, glowing mithril deposit within a cavern, explaining that this mine was a hidden area, typically inaccessible until the later stages of the game. However, because it physically existed in this world, he was able to discover it prematurely. Cain's father, still reeling from the revelation, asked for confirmation, which Cain readily provided. His father then questioned whether they should report the discovery to the royal family. Cain, a sly grin spreading across his face, warned that doing so would likely result in heavy taxation or the seizure of their mining rights. Instead, he proposed they secretly organize a powerful mining team to exploit the resource themselves. He explained that the mithril mine lay on the border of their territory in Viscount Fernand's, making cooperation with the Fernand family indispensable to conceal the mine's existence and awaken Selvia's powers. His father, initially surprised, then grew thoughtful, acknowledging the new information and stating that such a development changed everything, requiring a further push. That further push was a document his father now stared at, his eyes wide with shock, exclaiming in disbelief at its contents. He confirmed it was a secret letter from Prince Leon. Cain recounted how he had shown it to Selvia, who, in a defiant act, declared she would not obey the prince's orders and tore the letter to shreds. His father, realizing the gravity of the situation, understood that if Selvia reported this to Prince Leon, the Charbart's family would undoubtedly face severe punishment. With this bold move, Cain asserted, his father's path of retreat was cut off. He further explained that Viscount Fernand's daughter was already viewed as a fake saintess by other nobles, and if they disregarded the prince's orders and formed an alliance, the Fernan family would surely become their staunch allies. Cain pressed on, urging his father to consider that with Mithril as a bargaining chip, they could even secure more favorable terms from the Atlassian Empire. He passionately declared that by obtaining both the Mithril Mine and the World Tree Sanctus, they could become a great noble family, surpassing even the royal family. His father, after a moment of internal struggle, finally conceded, saying, "I understand." His father, now standing and facing him, acknowledged that a true noble must be able to act calmly and take calculated risks to secure profit, lest they fall. He then gave the decisive instruction, "Then, tonight, we will welcome Selvia." As he descended the grand staircase, a sense of relief washed over him. With this, Selvia would no longer endure abuse in this house, and she would never again display the dark, shadowed smile that marked her fate in the original game. Suddenly, he was startled as a blonde woman, his sister Ellis, embraced him from behind, exclaiming, "Wow, Cain, you're amazing. You're so cool." She added playfully that he seemed to have become a hero of legend, having stolen Prince Leon's affection. He looked utterly flustered, calling out her name. He asked if she had overheard his conversation with their father. She replied that she had not intended to eavesdrop, but Selvia had been crying loudly, which made her wonder what was happening. He acknowledged her point about Selvia's crying, realizing it was likely tears of joy. He mused internally that it was certainly interesting to see his sister sticking her nose into his love life. He found himself embraced by Ellis, who expressed her admiration for his actions, calling him super cool for being able to defy the prince. She then asked him to be kind to Selvia, emphasizing that her cooperation was indispensable for Ellis to become a saintess. As she spoke, he clutched a letter, recognizing it as Selvia's final message. Ellis, still in the grand hall, then inquired about the meaning of baby's breath flowers, revealing that they symbolized eternal love. His mind reeled, a wave of self-reproach washing over him as he realized the profound implications of her words, seeing Selvia's form surrounded by the very flowers Ellis had just described, standing before a cross. He felt like an utter fool. Overwhelmed by this sudden realization, he stumbled and fell to the ground, Ellis looking down at him with concern, asking where he was going. He rushed to his room, frantically searching through his belongings, his gaze fixed on a peculiar mask. He then discovered a small, glistening seed, recognizing it as a holy seed of the World Tree. He understood that only the saintess of the World Tree possessed the power to control such plants. As he pondered this, Ellis entered the room, asking what was wrong. He realized that if Selvia had already awakened her powers as a saintess, then her defiance of Prince Leon was not merely an act of rebellion, but a calculated move with far-reaching consequences. The truth solidified in his mind. Selvia's actions were driven by a deep love for him. He looked down, a profound message echoing in his thoughts. "Your love will live on forever." It was a message left for him by the saintess of the World Tree. He turned to Ellis, addressing her by name, and confessed that he had forgotten to prepare a welcoming gift for Selvia. He approached Ellis, asking if she would help him gather baby's breath flowers. She found the idea wonderful, perfect for a gift to his fiancée. Ellis readily agreed, stating she would handle the wrapping. While Ellis meticulously prepared the bouquet, carefully arranging the delicate flowers and ribbons, he diligently worked in the garden, gathering more of the small white blossoms. The effort of gathering so many flowers left him utterly exhausted, his body slumped and his breath coming in ragged gasps. Despite his fatigue, he presented the carefully arranged bouquet to Selvia at the grand hall. His father, however, was displeased, questioning why he had made such an important fiancé wait. He apologized, explaining he had been preparing the bouquet for Selvia. He then explained to Selvia that he had finally understood the meaning of her letter, and that the baby's breath flowers symbolized eternal love. He asked if she would accept this gift as his reply. With a radiant smile, she affirmed her acceptance, expressing her happiness. Later, at the banquet, he observed Selvia, reflecting that while he had failed to make her happy in the game, he would now strive to do so in this new reality. As night fell over the mansion, a profound realization settled upon him. Selvia was the saintess of the World Tree, a truth she had kept hidden from everyone. She then spoke to him, her voice soft but clear, asking if he had welcomed her not because she was the saintess, but because he wished to love her purely. He later discussed the situation with Ellis, acknowledging that Selvia's identity as the saintess was a significant matter. He considered that if she were truly the saintess, it might be better for her to be taken by Prince Leon. However, he quickly dismissed the thought, resolving to become stronger than anyone else to protect Selvia. Selvia then explained her actions, revealing that she had angered Prince Leon because she was about to be pushed down and become his beloved. Overwhelmed, she had instinctively called out Cain's name. He listened, a look of understanding dawning on his face. He considered Prince Leon's true intentions, realizing the prince knew Selvia's feelings and sought to exact revenge by humiliating her. Selvia, distressed, worried that she would continue to be tormented in the future. He quickly reassured her, promising that everything would be all right. He then declared his plan. In 1 year, a martial arts tournament hosted by Prince Leon would take place, though it had not yet been publicly announced. The victor would be granted a wish from the prince. He intended to win that tournament. Selvia gasped in surprise. He admitted that the hero Abel always participated in such tournaments, but he was confident that if he became strong enough now, victory would undoubtedly be his. He elaborated, explaining that if he won and received a wish from Prince Leon, he would use it to prevent Selvia from being forced into a marriage. He believed the prince would not be able to refuse such a request made publicly. She gasped again, a realization dawning on her. If Cain truly won, then Prince Leon's commands regarding her could be nullified. Her eyes widened with a mixture of shock and burgeoning hope. He vowed with fierce determination that even if Selvia's true identity as the saintess were to be exposed, she would absolutely never again be taken by Prince Leon. She took his hands, her gaze soft and filled with emotion. She declared that she would never again leave his side, feeling as if she were living a beautiful dream. Cain pushed himself through a rigorous training regimen, running laps around the estate's track. He felt a profound sluggishness, a direct consequence of his recent overindulgence. His face flushed with exertion. He recalled the vast array of sweets and pastries he had consumed. Meanwhile, a group of maids watched him from a distance, their hushed giggles carrying on the breeze. They spoke of the upcoming martial arts tournament, noting that the hero, Abel, was widely expected to win, and wondered if Cain would simply be crushed. The whispers of the world confirmed the maids' speculation. The martial arts tournament, set to occur 1 year from now, was destined to crown Abel as its victor. Despite the overwhelming odds, Cain continued his strenuous training, sweat beading on his brow. He envisioned Abel, the world's protagonist, surrounded by a growing harem of beautiful women, including the saintess Selvia. He knew that to overcome such a formidable opponent, he could not afford to waste a single day. One of the maids, still observing from afar, pondered the situation. She knew Selvia would never be taken from Cain, yet she wondered why Cain had changed his attitude towards Selvia, now treating her with such warmth and affection, almost like family. Cain, overhearing their conversation, turned with a questioning look. The maids, startled, quickly covered their mouths, but one of them blurted out a question about whether he had truly declared he would protect Selvia and her love. His surprise quickly turned to shock as two young women, his sisters, suddenly appeared, running towards him with an energetic stride. They called out his name, their voices filled with enthusiasm. The blonde sister, beaming, offered to join him in his special training. She explained that if they cooperated, it would make it easier to verify if his game knowledge was applicable in this world, and she thanked him for the opportunity. Moments later, Cain found himself running alongside his two sisters, who were now literally chained to him. They found the unusual arrangement enjoyable, likening it to a game of tag they used to play as children. Cain, however, could only question the presence of the chains. He continued to run, panting heavily, the chains clanking with each step. He mused internally that having Selvia as his fiancée felt like a dream too good to be true. Beside him, the blonde sister, still full of energy, declared that the training was fun, just like the old days. He found himself still chained, as his blonde sister held up a leash attached to a collar around her neck, declaring herself Cain's possession. She instructed him to hold the leash firmly. Cain, aghast, recoiled, thinking how Selvia would react to such a sight, dismissing it as a terrible lie. Earlier that morning, a butler had informed Cain that Prince Leon suspected his obedience and had sent a magical camera. The prince demanded images of Selvia being tormented, implying Cain's compliance was being tested. Cain examined the device, realizing it was a convenient magical item that combined the functions of a digital camera and a printer, capable of instantly transferring still images onto paper. Back in the present, his blonde sister, still enthusiastically chained, declared that with the collar and chains, they could perfectly capture images of Selvia being tormented. She insisted this was all for Cain's happy future, before suddenly dashing off, pulling him along with her. He looked down at the chains on his wrist, a look of bewildered discomfort etched across his face. His blonde sister, holding the magical camera, smiled brightly and told both Cain and the light-haired sister that their expressions were excellent. She then instructed Cain to act like a villain tormenting a poor noble girl. The light-haired sister, kneeling and still chained, looked up at him with a blush, admitting she was still a bit shy. The blonde sister, however, urged her to pull herself together and shout villainous lines. He forced a manic smile, reciting a line that declared Selvia his possession and warned her not to escape. He recognized it as a famous line from the game's villain, Cain. The light-haired sister, still on her knees, blushed deeply and declared herself Cain's possession for life. He internally reacted, thinking her expression was unfair. His blonde sister then asked if they should move on to the next scene, where Cain would torment her. He looked surprised by the suggestion. Suddenly, the butler from earlier rushed towards them, shouting about an urgent report. Having interrupted Cain's staged photoshoot, the butler delivered his urgent report. He informed the young master that the soldiers had investigated the location Cain specified, leading to the discovery of an unknown cave. To their astonishment, it was a mithril mine. The butler exclaimed his excitement, adding that his lordship was also greatly pleased by the news. Cain, his eyes wide with excitement, immediately grasped the significance, declaring that such a discovery would bring immense development to their land. Internally, he felt a sense of relief and confirmation, realizing that this discovery solidified his belief. The geography and resources of the game world were indeed identical to those of the real world. The butler approached Cain, inquiring about his current activities. Cain, flustered, stammered that there was a deep reason for his actions, while the blonde sister continued to snap photographs. The butler questioned Cain's explanation, asking if he truly meant to act so brazenly. Meanwhile, the blonde sister interjected, clarifying that her actions were an act of love for Lancelot. She then urged them not to misunderstand, explaining that her efforts were all for Prince Leon. The butler simply acknowledged her statement. Cain, still visibly embarrassed, finally managed to blurt out that he actually had a request for Lancelot. He then directly addressed the butler, identifying him as Lancelot, the strongest knight of the former kingdom, and asked if he would teach him swordsmanship. The butler, now revealed as Lancelot, calmly asked if he meant the sword itself. Cain affirmed his seriousness, explaining that Lancelot had been a formidable opponent, a protector of the villainous noble family, in the game he knew. A screen nearby displayed game footage of Lancelot in combat. With a determined grin, Cain declared his ultimate goal, to win the Royal Martial Arts Tournament. Lancelot listened, his expression growing serious. Lancelot then set a condition for his tutelage, stating that Cain must acquire at least one combat skill. Cain readily agreed, promising to achieve it immediately. The blonde sister, overhearing the exchange, wondered aloud if skills were not easily acquired. Cain clarified that he had managed to obtain skills by clearing difficult conditions within the game, Apocalypse. Lancelot accepted Cain's resolve, telling him to prove his words if he truly could. Cain bowed respectfully as Lancelot turned and walked away. He listened as the blonde sister offered her assistance, declaring she would help him. Cain expressed his gratitude, acknowledging that her cooperation would be a great aid. With her agreement, he led them outside, explaining that while the conditions for skill acquisition were indeed difficult, there were also certain shortcuts. He then instructed her to throw balls at him, slowly at first, to which she questioned if such a method was truly acceptable. The training began, with Cain wielding a stick like a bat, attempting to deflect the projectiles. Many balls flew past him, some even striking the blonde sister as she continued to throw. Suddenly, a familiar system voice, one he recognized from the game, echoed in his mind, announcing his success. Congratulations! You have successfully deflected a projectile 30 times in a row. You have acquired the skill Projectile Deflection. Success rate for deflecting projectiles increased by 50%. He cheered triumphantly, exclaiming that he had finally obtained his very first skill, his excitement palpable as the blonde sister and light-haired sister looked on. The blonde sister, still processing the event, looked utterly surprised, asking if it was truly possible to acquire a skill through such a simple action. He clarified that skills could indeed be acquired mechanically if the conditions were met. For projectile deflection, the requirement was to deflect projectiles 30 times in a row, and even slow balls thrown by a girl were sufficient. The blonde sister, amazed, then inquired where he had gained such profound knowledge. He internally mused that he had heard about it from an adventurer he had encountered by chance. He also considered that while skill acquisition conditions were generally public knowledge, available in the Royal Library, projectile deflection was not listed, suggesting it was a high-level skill. He realized he could not simply explain it away as knowledge from a game. The blonde sister then expressed her own desire to acquire the projectile deflection skill. He thought of Selvia, who wished to become strong for him, and decided to play with her, mimicking the game's mechanics to help her acquire skills. As the blonde sister encouraged Selvia, who now held a bat, he smiled, suggesting they all try together. Selvia, eager, readily agreed, and the three began their training. He watched as the blonde sister continued her rigorous training, her movements precise and focused. She successfully deflected projectiles 30 consecutive times, a clear sign of her rapid progress. Moments later, the blonde sister celebrated her achievement, excitedly informing Cain that she had successfully acquired the projectile deflection skill. Her joy was palpable as she embraced him. As Selvia listened intently, the blonde sister explained that the Saintess of the World Tree possessed a hidden technique capable of dramatically enhancing the power of fire magic. She believed Selvia's inherent abilities were perfectly suited for it. The training continued, pushing Selvia to her limits until she collapsed in exhaustion, muttering about her older sister. Cain observed her, reflecting that while Selvia was primarily a recovery and support character, this intensive training was transforming her into a formidable offensive force. He wondered what they should do next, suggesting they teach her fire magic. Later, Cain found himself deep in thought, realizing that not only his father, but also Ellis, existed in this world, not just within the game. He considered the possibility that something might have happened to Ellis in the 3 years leading up to the game's start. A profound sense of concern washed over him, solidifying his resolve. He wanted to save Ellis. Lancelot, the butler, stood before the young Master Cain, who held a wooden sword. Cain inquired if Lancelot, a former knight of the kingdom, could teach him a specific skill. Lancelot, surprised by the request, questioned if Cain truly believed he could acquire such an ability. Cain affirmed his belief, explaining that he possessed a unique skill, the Black Moon's Blade, which could negate an opponent's abilities. He then asked Lancelot to investigate his other latent skills. Lancelot, bowing respectfully, acknowledged the request and departed to fulfill it. As Lancelot delved into Cain's abilities, he discovered the arrow shot skill, a technique so rare that it was almost exclusively known to the royal guard and considered a national secret. He realized with a shock that Cain's previous facade of incompetence must have been a deliberate act, as mastering such a skill would be impossible for an ordinary person. Lancelot, now deeply suspicious, pondered Cain's true intentions, imagining a knight riddled with arrows. Cain, with a confident smile, declared his earnest goal, to win the upcoming martial arts tournament to protect Saintess Selvia. Cain reiterated his unwavering resolve to protect Selvia, his expression bright and determined. Lancelot, observing the young master's conviction, remained silent, a mix of surprise and grudging respect on his face, while other household members celebrated in the background. Lancelot admitted his previous underestimation of Cain. He acknowledged the young master's serious resolve to stand against Prince Leon and protect Selvia, recognizing the gravity of such a commitment. He then proposed the first step in Kane's training: 1,000 sword swings every day for a month. Lancelot emphasized that without such dedication, winning the martial arts tournament within a year would remain an impossible dream. Lancelot internally mused on the immense challenge, questioning if Kane could truly achieve sword skill level 5 within a year. He knew that reaching such a level, which granted a 50% boost to accuracy and attack power along with a breakthrough effect, was typically reserved for knight captains and represented the pinnacle of swordsmanship. Kane, undeterred by the daunting task, readily agreed to the 1,000 daily swings. He then eagerly asked if there was anything else he needed to do. Lancelot, surprised by Kane's immediate acceptance, explained that basic swings alone were insufficient. Kane would need to absorb all of Lancelot's techniques and gain practical experience within the year. He then demonstrated the proper form for the 1,000 daily swings. Kane, now holding a wooden sword, thanked Lancelot, who observed him, realizing the young master's previous indolent life had been a carefully constructed facade. He continued his rigorous training, practicing sword forms with a wooden blade. Lancelot observed him intently. Kane, grateful for the guidance, thanked his mentor and asked for any necessary corrections. He then executed a swift, precise sword movement, demonstrating his focus. Moments later, a triumphant grin spread across his face as he declared he had mastered sword skill level 1. Lancelot stared in disbelief, realizing Kane had perfectly replicated the complex form after seeing it only once. He questioned if Kane had secretly been learning swordsmanship all along. Still reeling from Kane's astonishing progress, Lancelot pondered the concept of God's blessing, a rare gift bestowed upon only a select few. He considered Kane's unique skill, Black Moon's Blade, which possessed a dark attribute, and found the boy's abnormal growth rate and inherent abilities utterly fascinating. After further intense practice, he lay sprawled on the floor, drenched in sweat and utterly exhausted. Lancelot stood over him, acknowledging his effort. Despite his fatigue, Kane managed to declare that he had successfully completed the demanding training. Lancelot observed the boy, a thoughtful expression on his face, reflecting on Kane's undeniable talent and the burning passion he held for the sword. He concluded that Kane was, without a doubt, a true genius. Later, in a grand, ornate chamber, he approached a distinguished lord, seeking his counsel. Lancelot inquired if the lord would be willing to teach Kane swordsmanship. The lord, a man with a knowing smile, remarked that Kane was clearly different now, as if a talent within him had awakened, and agreed to provide the necessary push. He looked down, a profound sense of purpose in his gaze, contemplating the immense talent he was about to nurture with his own hands. The next day, Kane continued his rigorous sword training, his body glistening with sweat. His hands, though calloused, were now covered in fresh blisters from the intense effort. The butler observed him, asking why he pushed himself to such extremes. Kane, panting, declared it was to bring happiness to the best heroine. The butler's expression grew serious, questioning the identity of this best heroine. He continued his intense sword training, the sound of his blade cutting through the air growing sharper with each swing. The butler watched, noting that Salvia was also diligently training her fire magic, which made Kane's efforts all the more intriguing. A satisfied smile spread across his face as he mused on Kane's increasing strength. Kane, with a final powerful strike, exclaimed his success. Kane was then approached by the blonde sister, who excitedly informed him that she had learned high-speed chanting level 1, exactly as he had taught her. Kane expressed his surprise. She explained that she could now cast Petit Fire 50 times a day, and the high-speed chanting skill allowed spells to activate in under 3 seconds, requiring less heat. She added that practicing simple beginner magic was the most effective way to master it. She looked surprised, asking if such a secret technique was truly unknown to everyone else. Kane explained that powerful mages in this world typically learned advanced magic through their status, and because of its inherent value, he believed the high-speed chanting skill was not widely known. He emphasized that in a mage's battle, the one who casts first holds an absolute advantage, and a mage's quality is determined by their accuracy and speed, especially since being hit during chanting would cancel the spell. The blonde sister agreed, understanding that she needed to study more. She then expressed her fierce determination, stating that she must quickly master high-speed chanting, because she was Kane's fiancée and needed to be able to proudly declare it. Kane, looking flustered, told her not to overdo it. She then asked if he was suggesting she should stop her daily 3,000 practice swings. She then presented Kane with a small bottle, explaining it was an enhanced recovery potion she had made by adding mandragora to a magical plant, multiplying its effectiveness. She revealed she possessed the pharmacist level 1 skill and could mix ingredients if she had the raw materials. She stated that managing her beloved fiancé's physical condition was her duty. Kane was surprised, noting it looked like a normal recovery potion. Kane was relieved, realizing his training fatigue would be instantly gone. He thanked her, acknowledging her great help. She then asked what they should do next, expressing a desire to be even more useful to him. Kane, with a serious expression, told her that while it was necessary, she should avoid using magic other than her affinity. He then revealed their next task, subjugating a demon beast. The blonde sister was shocked, questioning if he truly meant a demon beast subjugation. She explained that the strength of the kingdom's proud Count Shabalt's family did not lie in demon beast subjugation. She warned him that the blood bear, a demon beast that had appeared in the forest, was a dangerous A-rank threat, so formidable that even the Adventurers Guild could not handle it. She overheard the stern lord, his voice laced with frustration as he argued with the butler. He questioned the wisdom of deploying valuable military forces for mere demon beast subjugation, deeming it an unacceptable waste. As the discussion continued, Cain and the blonde sister listened intently from behind a partially open door. They heard the Lord mention the blood bear, an A-rank demon beast, and Cain's eyes widened in recognition, realizing this was the very target he had just discussed. Suddenly, Cain burst into the room, his presence commanding attention. He declared his intention to personally undertake the subjugation of the demon beast, a pronouncement that left the Lord and the young man beside him utterly astonished. Recovering from the shock, the Lord offered a sheepish apology for his unexpected outburst, while Cain and the blonde sister stood composedly by the doorway, observing the scene. Despite the formal pleasantries, the blonde sister's expression betrayed a deep concern. She knew the enemy was an A-rank demon beast, a formidable foe that would normally be considered impossible to defeat, and she felt a premonition of victory. Her concern evident, she then spoke, offering to accompany Cain on the dangerous mission. The Lord, however, questioned her, asking if she was the rumored fake saintess who was being pursued as a criminal by the royal family. Cain, hearing this, immediately became enraged, his voice rising as he vehemently defended her, forbidding anyone from calling her Selvia in such a derogatory manner. Cain quickly corrected the misunderstanding, explaining that Selvia had merely declared herself a saintess, and it was the church that had mistakenly recognized her as such. The Lord and the young man, realizing their error, bowed deeply in apology. Seeing Cain's fierce loyalty, the blonde sister's heart swelled with affection, confirming her belief that he was indeed the finest man in the world. He, however, sternly reminded her not to speak ill of the people of his territory, including Selvia. With renewed determination, Cain declared that he and Selvia alone would defeat the demon beast, asserting that the butler's assistance was unnecessary. The Lord, taken aback by this audacious claim, questioned his decision, particularly regarding Selvia's involvement, as her presence might lead to her being mistaken for the saintess of the world tree. Cain, however, remained resolute, confident in their ability. As the tension lingered, Cain and the blonde sister stood together, reassuring the Lord that he had no cause for concern. He had asserted their capability, and the First Lord, a man of sharp features, affirmed his confidence. If it is young Cain, there is no need to worry about him being late to subjugate the blood bear, he declared. I guarantee it. The butler, Lancelot, then elaborated, explaining that Cain had already reached sword skill level 3 in just 2 weeks. The Lord reacted with astonishment, exclaiming that such a feat was already the domain of a first-class swordsman. He closed his eyes, a slight smile playing on his lips, contemplating the combination of Cain's unique skill, the Black Moon sword, and his terrifying talent. There is nothing left but to laugh at such a terrifying talent, he mused, a hint of awe in his voice. Meanwhile, Cain and the blonde sister discussed his progress. She expressed surprise, noting that just yesterday he had been at sword skill level 2. He, however, beamed, explaining that thanks to Lancelot's morning training, he had been able to raise his skill level further, offering a heartfelt, "Thank you, Lancelot." The blonde sister, her eyes wide with a mix of determination and concern, realized she did not want to be taken back by Prince Leon. She resolved to acquire the strength to live alongside Cain. As she pondered this, the butler Lancelot, observing Cain and Selvia from a distance, reflected on his own duty. He thought that if this saintess of the world tree was exposed, he would have to take Selvia and flee. He also believed it was crucial to ensure Selvia gained the power of self-defense for any eventuality. His thoughts continued, emphasizing that formalities were unnecessary and that he, Lancelot, would teach Cain the sword. He also internally urged himself to work harder to keep up with Cain. Meanwhile, Cain gently took the blonde sister's hand, a gesture that surprised her. He then reached out and softly patted her head, causing her cheeks to flush with a deep blush. Cain trained with fierce determination, his sword raised high, ready to strike. Each swing was imbued with a raw, explosive power, hinting at the rapid growth of his abilities. He continued his rigorous practice, bringing his blade down with a powerful, fiery impact that shattered the training dummy. The force of his strike sent debris flying, a testament to his increasing might, all while the butler observed from a discreet distance. The butler then approached, commending Cain on his impressive progress. He noted that Cain's sword skill and the Sword of Dark Moon had powered up exactly as intended, explaining that the effect of the sword skill was to increase attack power and accuracy. He expressed his gratitude that Cain's power could be used for the subjugation of demon beasts in the territory. The butler further elaborated that Cain had quickly reached sword skill level 3 thanks to the excellent tutelage of Lancelot. Cain, however, pondered if he needed more practical experience to truly become stronger. Cain acknowledged the difficulty of challenging an A-rank demon beast, but admitted he was relieved that Lancelot had managed to persuade his father. He then inquired if there was a chance of victory against such a formidable foe. The target of their discussion, a blood bear, was an A-rank demon beast. It possessed no magical abilities and was not particularly intelligent, yet it remained a terrifying opponent due to its sheer physical might. The butler bowed deeply, stating his unwavering belief that Cain was truly born to be a hero, and wished him well on his endeavor. Cain, meanwhile, inwardly celebrated the bonus points he would receive for leveling up and the high probability of acquiring a super skill. He blushed slightly, a private thought crossing his mind about how happy he was to be with his brother. As they journeyed through a lush forest, Selvia expressed her comfort, noting that the world tree saintess controlled the plants, making the forest a true sanctuary. She added that everyone was opening their hearts to welcome Cain. He then turned to her, asking what she was searching for in this particular area. Selvia then asked Cain if he knew about the aldrich flower, also known as the destroyer of the forest. She explained that it was an item easily overlooked in games and typically considered a mere collection item. She explained that the aldrich flower releases a volatile oil, causing it to spontaneously combust. Its seeds possess strong fire resistance, allowing it to use the ashes of other plants as nutrients to propagate. She continued, describing it as the world tree Sanus's fire-type build, a flower that disregards harmony with other plants. Cain then noticed the flower, realizing it was the one she spoke of. Holding the delicate bloom, he remarked on its unexpected beauty, then inquired if it would spontaneously combust. She reassured him, explaining that it only ignites in high-temperature environments, making it safe for now. She further elaborated that the aldrich flower's combustible gas could be summoned, and its burning power significantly enhanced by fire magic, specifically through a petit fire, technique unique to her style. She explained that the colorless gas she summoned was imperceptible to anyone but the world tree saintess herself. Combining 3 such elements, she noted, created a formidable build, though it was challenging to master. He watched as she demonstrated her magic, combining petit fire with a skill and the aldrich flower's inherent power. The resulting explosion was immense, consuming a wide area with powerful flames, all while requiring almost no MP and exhibiting no time lag. He was astonished by the sheer power, realizing that this combination of abilities, particularly with the aldrich flower, could be devastating in battle, a true synergy. Suddenly, she gasped, startled by something unseen. He quickly pulled her close, shielding her as he prepared for an unknown threat. They then discovered a group of black wolves attacking a young man approximately 400 meters north. Cain, recognizing the immediate danger, prepared to act, noting that the forest was supposed to be off-limits to children. A young man, caught in the forest, found himself engulfed in a terrifying explosion of dark energy and flames, his face contorted in sheer terror as monstrous black wolves lunged at him. Just as the wolves closed in, Cain swiftly moved to shield Selvia, drawing his sword. Selvia, startled by the unexpected power of their attackers, exclaimed her surprise, while Cain, with a determined glare, warned her to stay behind him, declaring that the wolves' true opponent was him. With incredible speed, Cain unleashed a devastating strike, his sword slicing through one of the black wolves, which instantly disintegrated into a shower of dark particles, leaving no trace behind. The young man, still reeling from the attack, watched in stunned amazement. As the immediate threat subsided, Selvia praised Cain's prowess, noting how he had effortlessly defeated a black wolf with just one hand. Cain, however, dismissed her compliments, suggesting it was merely Selvia's turn to act. Selvia, blushing, secretly wished Cain would embrace her. The rescued young man, his fear now replaced by indignation, confronted them, demanding to know their identities and accusing them of being reckless adventurers. Selvia calmly denied being an adventurer, introducing herself as Selvia Fernan. Cain then revealed his own identity as Cain Schwartz, the son of the local lord, and questioned why the young man had ventured into the forest. A brief memory flashed through Cain's mind, recalling a time when he, as a younger boy, was criticized for his poor reputation, yet still offered a handshake to the same young man, who was also younger than. Back in the present, the young man observed Selvia, noting her appearance suggested she was a wanderer. He then rudely questioned why she wore a choker, immediately regretting his impoliteness after Cain had just saved him. Cain, with a casual air, declared that Selvia was his slave. Selvia, surprisingly, confirmed this with a cheerful yes. The young man was aghast, demanding to know if Cain would truly enslave such a lovely girl, calling him a vile noble. Selvia, however, quickly defended Cain, proclaiming him to be the kindest and best man in the entire world. Cain, exasperated, told the young man to correct his misunderstanding. Internally, he admitted his own confusion, acknowledging that he didn't fully grasp the situation but knew he had to follow Prince Leon's orders. He looked at the young man, who, despite his previous shock, now pleaded desperately, his voice strained. No, more importantly, my sister is caught by a blood bear. Please help me. The blood bear, a monstrous creature known to drain human blood, was a terrifying threat. Its lair was littered with skeletal remains, a grim testament to its victims. Immediate rescue was imperative, or the sister would surely perish. As the young man spoke of the danger, Selvia questioned him, asking if he had entered the forbidden forest with his sister. He explained that he was a pharmacist, accustomed to gathering medicinal herbs while hiding from monsters. Overwhelmed by the situation, he fell to his knees before Cain, bowing his head in supplication. Please, I beg you, help my sister. I'll do anything for your kindness. Cain observed him, noting the young man's desperate plea. Cain calmly told him there was no need for such groveling. Selvia, ever helpful, stepped forward, offering, please leave it to me. Cain then turned to the young man, asking, so, where was your sister captured? The young man, still reeling from the previous encounter, expressed surprise that a noble would offer assistance. Cain, however, dismissed his astonishment, stating it was only natural to help someone who was injured. He quickly thanked them, then introduced himself. My name is Ashud. He then provided the crucial detail. My sister was captured by the river about 2 hours ago. Selvia, turning to Cain, then asked for his name. Ashud took a small bottle and drank its contents. A moment later, his eyes widened in shock. What is this? This potent recovery effect. Does it contain mandragora? Both Cain and Selvia looked at him, surprised by his sudden outburst and knowledge. Ashud, still astonished, explained, Mandragora is an S-rank super luxury material. Selvia wondered aloud. Where in this forest did you get it? Cain, observing the exchange, internally mused that it was not something a world tree maiden would summon. Ashud, regaining his composure, then proudly declared, I'm not boasting, but I possess the pharmacist level 4 skill. He explained that the ingredients for this recovery potion were incredibly difficult to handle, almost impossible for a child to manage. Yet, he asserted that he and his sister could create a highly effective recovery potion. Selvia listened, her expression a mix of surprise and concern. Cain, absorbing this information, acknowledged that if Ashud truly possessed pharmacist level 4, then it was indeed fortunate. Ashud, beaming, then revealed that his sister was even more amazing, possessing pharmacist level 5. This declaration left Cain utterly stunned. As they continued their journey through the forest, a chilling, bestial shriek suddenly pierced the air. He instantly recognized the terrifying sound, a roar he knew well from his past experiences. It was the cry of a blood bear. A monstrous blood bear loomed over a young woman, its massive claws poised to strike. Nearby, young man 1 cried out in alarm, while Cain stood ready, observing the terrifying creature. The blood bear began to drain the young woman's blood, a horrifying act that visibly strengthened the beast. Young man 1 exclaimed that the creature was absorbing blood from Cain's sister, noting that its stats were increasing due to this vampiric action. Cain, however, prepared for a special counterattack. He sharply commanded the others to fall back, declaring that he would face the formidable opponent alone. With a powerful surge, Cain activated his flying bullet skill, which significantly boosted the success rate of his thrown tools by 50%. Combined with his engraving level 3, this further enhanced his accuracy by 30%. He unleashed a rapid, swirling barrage of attacks. Young man 1 watched in astonishment as Cain's precise attacks effectively nullified the bear's ranged assaults, creating a defensive barrier of force. He then expressed his amazement, remarking on Cain's incredible skill as a swordsman, before quickly correcting himself, realizing that Cain was not, in fact, a swordsman. The blood bear's attack pattern became clear. If approached, it would likely strike with its right arm. Cain, undeterred, confidently stated that he could handle the threat, even as the young woman cried out in concern for him. The monstrous creature roared, lunging forward with immense force, its massive claws tearing into the ground where Cain had just been, narrowly missing him as he swiftly evaded the blow. He continued his relentless assault, a dark, swirling energy emanating from his attacks as he pressed the advantage against the blood bear. Cain moved with incredible speed and precision, his eyes narrowed in intense focus as he aimed for the blood bear's chest, its known weak point. Young man 1 watched, utterly astonished by his prowess. He continued his relentless assault on the blood bear, which still held the unconscious young woman, her body limp as it continued to drain her life force. The monstrous beast roared, seemingly unfazed by the previous attack, and violently swatted him away. He crashed to the ground, scattering debris, as Selvia watched in terror, crying out his name. Just as the blood bear prepared to deliver a finishing blow to the fallen warrior, thorny vines erupted from the earth, coiling around the beast with incredible speed and force. Selvia, staff in hand, declared with fierce determination that she would not allow it to harm Cain. He watched, surprised, as Selvia controlled the plants, realizing she possessed a unique skill. He acknowledged her intervention, muttering that she had saved him, before reaching for a small bottle at his hip. The blood bear thrashed violently, roaring in frustration as the thorny vines held it captive, preventing any further movement. Selvia maintained her concentration, her face etched with strain as she kept the powerful beast restrained. He quickly drank from the small bottle, feeling a surge of energy. He observed Selvia's unique skill, noting that it required no incantation and surpassed all expectations. He wondered if this was revitalized. He seized the opportunity. With a burst of speed, he charged towards the now restrained blood bear, his body a blur of motion. He delivered a precise, powerful blow to the blood bear's vulnerable point, causing the massive beast to roar in agony as the impact rippled through its body. Cain, holding an unconscious Selvia, entrusted her to a small child, urging them to take care of her. The child, looking up with wide eyes, affirmed their understanding. He then turned his attention to another victim, a young woman bound by thorny vines, noting the strange entanglement. The child from before called out to the bound woman, identifying her as their sister. Cain confronted the monstrous blood bear, which bellowed that there were no more hostages left to protect. He swiftly engaged the beast, dodging its massive claw and expertly parrying its attack before delivering a precise sword strike. As the battle raged, Selvia, now awake, cried out to Cain, then unleashed a powerful spell, Aldous Flare, towards the blood bear. The ground erupted in a blinding flash of light and energy, a massive magical explosion radiating outwards from Selvia's spell. The intense magical blast continued to expand, engulfing the blood bear in its destructive force. Cain, having skillfully evaded the magical onslaught, readied his sword, realizing the powerful attack had shattered the beast's chest guard, exposing its vital weakness. With a decisive thrust, he plunged his blade deep into the blood bear's exposed chest, eliciting a final, agonizing roar from the monster. The colossal blood bear collapsed, defeated, its body dissolving into dark energy. Selvia, witnessing the monster's demise, exclaimed in relief and admiration that Cain had succeeded. The powerful magic and decisive blow had left a chaotic, dark residue in the air, the remnants of the defeated blood bear dissipating into nothingness. The dark energy continued its slow, ominous retreat, leaving behind only a lingering sense of the battle that had just concluded. Finally, the last vestiges of the dark power vanished completely, clearing the immediate area and marking the true end of the monstrous threat. Cain, who had delivered the final, fatal strike, looked on with a mixture of surprise and relief as a system message appeared before him, congratulating him on defeating a monster with a level difference of 30 or more. He processed the unexpected achievement. His eyes widened further as more system notifications flooded his vision, announcing a massive level increase from 7 to 15 and the acquisition of a new skill, Giant Killing. The messages also detailed his unique skill, Sword of the Dark Moon, which now granted him a 30% boost to sword accuracy and attack power. Selvia stood beside him, observing the unfolding events. She expressed her relief, calling out to him, and then wondered aloud if her assistance had been truly helpful. He reassured her, explaining that his success was entirely thanks to her powerful Aldous Flare spell. Internally, he reviewed the details of his new Giant Killing skill, noting its effect of doubling attack power and accuracy against enemies with less than half HP, and how it synergized perfectly with his Sword of the Dark Moon skill, making his build incredibly potent. Meanwhile, Cain knelt beside Ashud, the young man who had been attacked by the blood bear. Ashud lay injured on the ground, and Cain began to tend to him. A thought crossed Cain's mind about the inherent weakness of swordsmen against ranged attacks, but also the potential to overcome it if they possessed a means of closing the distance. Ashud, now conscious and visibly distressed, looked up at Selvia, his expression a mix of anger and desperation, and asked if she was indeed the saintess of the World Tree. Cain watched the tense exchange, sensing the gravity of the question. Selvia, looking downcast and uncomfortable, confirmed her identity. Ashud then revealed a critical detail. If her true identity were to be exposed, he and Prince Leon would be forced to break their engagement, implying severe political repercussions. He pleaded with them to keep her identity a secret, explaining that Prince Leon intended to exploit the power of the World Tree Saintess for his own purposes in an impending war. Cain listened intently, the full weight of Ashud's revelation settling upon him. He considered the gravity of the situation, realizing that Ashud, despite his injuries, would need to be hidden away for at least a year to protect the secret. Ashud, now on his feet, glared at him, vehemently declaring that he would never betray the one who saved his and his sister's lives. Cain offered a gentle smile, while Ashud, still wary, maintained a slight pout. Ashud then explained that the Saintess of the World Tree was revered as a god among the elves, and it was an honor to meet her. He adamantly refused to reveal Selvia's identity to other elves, explaining that their original tribe had been destroyed, leaving them rootless wanderers scattered across various lands. Cain observed a distant village, understanding that elves were known for forming reclusive communities and rarely accepting outsiders. Ashud, with a determined expression, swore he would not leak Selvia's secret to anyone else, not even his sister. Selvia, now sitting up, thanked him sincerely. Cain then proposed a solution. If Ashud had nowhere else to go, he could serve the Schwartz family as Selvia's exclusive pharmacist. Ashud's eyes widened in utter shock at the unexpected offer. Cain elaborated, explaining that the Saintess of the World Tree's power was perfectly compatible with a pharmacist's abilities, allowing for the mass production of rare medicines. He added that this arrangement would also allow them to monitor Ashud and ensure the secret remained safe. Selvia, overhearing, looked thoughtful. She remembered the harrowing journey through the forest, a young man desperately carrying an injured Ashud, whose side bled profusely. The memory brought a fresh wave of distress to her face, her eyes welling with tears as she recalled the fear and uncertainty of that time. Beside her, Cain looked on, a question forming in his mind, while she, with wide, innocent eyes, seemed to grasp the gravity of the past events. Deep within a verdant forest, the young Lord Cain, accompanied by Sylvia and the small boy Ash, continued their journey. The air was thick with the scent of damp earth and foliage, a quiet prelude to the events unfolding. Suddenly, Sylvia looked up, her eyes wide with surprise and a hint of fear, as if encountering something unexpected. She stammered a question, her voice barely a whisper. Cain, ever the protector, gently helped the small, fallen figure to its feet. Ash, standing nearby, quickly explained to Sylvia that both Cain and she had come to their aid. Sylvia, however, was utterly astonished, realizing that Cain was, in fact, the Lord's son. Ash, brimming with excitement, further elaborated that Cain intended to hire them as his exclusive pharmacists, a prospect that clearly delighted the young boy. Overwhelmed by the unexpected generosity, Sylvia bowed deeply, expressing her profound gratitude for their rescue and the offer of employment. Cain, observing their reactions, suggested they return home for a meal, proposing a welcome party to celebrate their new companions. Ash and Sylvia exchanged excited glances, clearly thrilled by the idea. Sylvia, still processing the rapid turn of events, apologized for any previous rudeness, acknowledging her misunderstanding of Cain's true identity. He graciously accepted her apology, recognizing her sincerity. As they walked, Cain proudly displayed the valuable materials he had acquired from a blood bear, its fur, teeth, and claws. He explained their high market value and their potential strategic importance for future endeavors. Sylvia then formally introduced herself as Lil, an elf pharmacist, and expressed her commitment to working hard alongside Ash. Cain, surprised, noted her impressive pharmacist level 5, acknowledging her skill. Despite her high level, Lil humbly admitted that her own concoctions were often useless and earnestly requested Cain to teach her pharmacist skills. Cain, a slight smile playing on his lips, listened intently. He listened as Ash, wide-eyed with surprise, exclaimed that the recovery potion from before must have been Sylvia's own creation. The grand estate stood majestically under the bright sky, a testament to the passage of time. 90 days had passed since he regained his memories of a previous life. Now, he found himself running across the grounds of a lavish estate, while Sylvia skipped alongside him, both observed by two attentive maids. He was sweating profusely, a stark contrast to Sylvia's carefree demeanor. The maids, their faces alight with admiration, called out to him, praising his appearance and urging him to turn their way. He felt a blush creep up his neck, realizing with a pang of embarrassment that he had been popular with girls even in his previous life, and this attention was almost too much to bear. Sylvia, observing his flushed face, leaned in close and quietly informed him that his smirk was becoming far too noticeable. She continued, explaining that he was now regarded as the guardian deity of Count Schwartz, and that his wonderful deeds were being spread among the people. The maids enthusiastically agreed, adding that he was truly a god. He, however, found the name Schwartz to be rather grand and somewhat embarrassing. His stock had indeed risen sharply after the subjugation of the Blood Bear. Since then, he had continued to defeat high-ranking monsters that the Adventurers Guild couldn't handle, leading to some even beginning to worship him as a guardian deity. He found it all rather overwhelming. He reflected that his monster subjugation and level-ups were all for Sylvia's sake, to ensure her happiness. As he watched Sylvia, with the maids still fawning over him in the background, he couldn't help but feel uneasy. High-ranking monsters were appearing far too frequently, even though the main story of the game hadn't even begun yet. He considered the possibility that this world was actually a second playthrough scenario, where the difficulty increased and rare monsters appeared more often after the first completion. If that were the case, it would be the worst possible outcome. He considered the possibility that the hero, Abel, might already be at the maximum level of 99. This realization brought a look of deep concern to his face. He knew his current growth rate was insufficient. Though his own level had reached 23, he calculated that he would need to be at least level 70 within the next 9 months to even stand a chance. To achieve such rapid growth, he concluded that his only option was to exploit a trick, forcing optimal boss monsters to respawn repeatedly for an intense grinding marathon. His feet moved with purpose, already set on this arduous path. Just as he considered the necessity of necromancy to revive corpses for his plan, a maid's urgent cry of "Young Master Cain" startled him, pulling him abruptly from his thoughts. Lancelot, the family's butler, swiftly intervened, scolding the maids for disturbing the young master. He then turned to Cain, praising him as a knight among knights for his dedication to the people. Internally, Lancelot was deeply moved, believing Cain had started the pharmacy business solely to form a private army for the territory's protection. Sylvia, overhearing Lancelot's praise, beamed with admiration, exclaiming that a private army for the territory was exactly what she expected from her brother. He, however, privately mused that his true motivation was to protect his favorite heroine. Lancelot continued, explaining that a powerful army was essential to protect Sylvia from the increasing number of high-rank monsters, and the challenge lay in forming such a force. Cain, meanwhile, confirmed with Lancelot that the ordered goods would arrive that day, internally noting how Ash and Lil were already producing high-quality medicinal plant materials summoned by Sylvia, which were then sold through merchants of the Adris Empire. Unbeknownst to Cain, Lancelot secretly considered him naive for his age, resolving to revolutionize the military structure. Later, Cain sat before a glowing screen, having concluded from extensive online discussions that acquiring a specific, expensive item was the most ideal strategy, a tactic he had merely copied from a game guide. He then turned to Lancelot, asking for his assistance with the large order he had already entrusted to the butler. Lancelot, misunderstanding Cain's intentions, declared with fervent passion that he would support him with all his might, deeply moved by what he perceived as Cain's willingness to sacrifice his personal fortune for the people's happiness. Cain, however, internally corrected him, knowing his true motivation was his own happiness. He found himself enveloped in a fervent embrace as Lancelot, overcome with emotion, declared his profound gratitude. The butler was deeply moved, proclaiming that Cain's actions had touched him to his very core. Lancelot continued his impassioned speech, praising Cain's dedication to the territory and expressing immense admiration. Cain, still caught in the unexpected embrace, attempted to interject, hinting that his true motives were not as selfless as Lancelot perceived. Meanwhile, elsewhere, a young woman named Ellis, with bright eyes and a joyful expression, shared her excitement. She revealed that her older sister, Eris, would be accompanying her to town that day to purchase new clothes. Ellis, still beaming, held Cain's hand and fondly recalled a previous outing, expressing her wish to go to town with him again. Cain, looking somewhat flustered, acknowledged her request but politely explained that he had other pressing matters to attend to, though he was pleased that Eris and Sylvia were getting along. Later, Ellis departed in a carriage, her happiness from the day's events still evident. Cain was also present in the carriage, observing the passing scenery as they traveled. Ellis, inside a lavish carriage, expresses her profound gratitude to Sylvia, attributing Cain's recent transformation and the flourishing success of his domain's politics and commerce entirely to her. Her face then lights up with an eager question, wondering if Sylvia and Cain have already shared a kiss. Sylvia, looking visibly flustered, quickly denies that anything of the sort has occurred. However, Ellis presses on, revealing that she had heard about an emergency hug involving Sylvia and the young lord, causing her to cover her mouth in sudden embarrassment, realizing she might have spoken out of turn. Ellis, with a determined expression, explains that Kane is diligently working every day to earn the recognition of both Prince Leon and Sylvia. Despite his efforts, she firmly believes he is still not a man truly worthy of Sylvia, a thought that causes Kane, in a brief flashback, to appear distressed. She continues, asserting that if Kane cannot even touch Sylvia or share a kiss, he will only cause her anxiety. Ellis then recalls how the previous pharmacist had created a magic potion for Kane, pondering if Kane himself had requested it. Sylvia, listening intently, seems to grasp a new understanding. Ellis then laments that her own attempts at providing special treatment for Kane, which she had thought were ideal, had ultimately failed, admitting that her request for a kiss was a significant overstep. Sylvia offers a comforting reassurance, stating unequivocally that Kane's love for Ellis is genuine. Meanwhile, the elegant carriage continues its journey, pulled steadily by two horses. Ellis, still visibly worried, admits her anxiety about the situation, particularly the potential consequences if Prince Leon were to discover their relationship. Sylvia, however, insists there is no need for worry or haste, suggesting that a simple false report would prevent anyone from finding out. Ellis then muses, wondering if Kane had been acting like a minor villain all along, and if his actions were a calculated strategy to protect Sylvia. Ellis, her face now beaming with unbridled joy, thanks Sylvia profusely for her words. Sylvia then suggests that upon their return to town, they should immediately try on the wonderful dresses they had purchased. Outside, the carriage driver, a man with a distinguished mustache and hat, glances back with a look of surprise, as if sensing an unseen disturbance. He muses that Kane would surely be overwhelmed by Sylvia's cuteness, perhaps even suffering a nosebleed. Suddenly, the carriage lurches with violent force, its wheels momentarily lifting from the ground as the horses rear up in distress, causing the driver to cry out in alarm. Inside, Sylvia is violently thrown forward, her eyes wide with shock and a cry of surprise escaping her lips as she struggles to comprehend what is happening. Still reeling from the violent jolt, the carriage was under attack. Ellis, peering out, gasped in horror as a man with light hair, Archibald, the first son of Count Orbel, declared himself responsible for the assault. He raged, claiming he had gone to great lengths to make her like him, only for her to reject his proposal. Fortunately, a defensive magic had protected her from serious injury. As the chaos unfolded, Archibald smiled smugly, adjusting his hair with a casual air, seemingly pleased with the spectacle he had created. Meanwhile, Ellis looked on with a worried expression, while Kane stood beside her, observing the unfolding events with a stern gaze. He continued to gloat, his smile turning sinister as he looked down at the distressed Ellis. She, in turn, stared back, her eyes wide with a mixture of fear and dawning realization, questioning if this Gordon was truly behind such a cruel act. Ignoring her terror, Archibald presented a bouquet of flowers, declaring Ellis beautiful, yet dismissing her as not his type. Ellis recoiled, her face a mask of disgust and distress, recalling her firm rejection of his advances. Kane stood nearby, his expression unreadable but clearly displeased. His pleasant facade shattered completely, Archibald's face contorted into a wide, maniacal grin, his eyes wild with rage. He shrieked, unable to comprehend how a magic genius like himself could be rejected by a cute little girl who had dared to get carried away. With his true nature fully exposed, Archibald stood before a large, gathered crowd, arms outstretched, a smug expression of triumph on his face. He boasted, revealing that he had orchestrated the attack by informing mountain bandits, and challenged the onlookers to finally comprehend his greatness. Below him, the damaged carriage remained, a stark testament to his malicious actions. Amidst a bustling crowd, Ellis stood with her maids, her expression a mixture of shock and distress as the events of Chapter 7 began to unfold around them. Archibald, his face contorted in a sneer, confronted her, accusing her of a foolish act involving Gordon that would inevitably lead to war with the Schubaltz family. Ellis, visibly shaken, vehemently denied his claims, asserting that her father would never allow such a thing. Suddenly, chaos erupted as Archibald's men, a brutal force of guards and soldiers, violently attacked Ellis's escorts. She watched in horror as her protectors were overwhelmed, their weapons clashing amidst cries of pain. As the skirmish continued, Archibald reveled in the unfolding violence, exclaiming his delight and declaring that he now held the power of life and death over the woman who had rejected his proposal. Meanwhile, Kane observed the scene from a distance, his expression unreadable. Archibald, standing beside the imposing figure of Gordon, seemed to be discussing the acquisition of another noble daughter, his words chillingly casual. Ellis, desperate, confronted Archibald, demanding that he cease his actions. She reminded him that she was his brother's important fiancée, but he merely dismissed her, speculating aloud if she might be Sylvia, the exiled saintess. She attempted to reassure her maids, telling them she was fine and urging them to stay back from the danger. Archibald then turned his attention to Kane, questioning him about his brother's fiancée and the trusted father who had given orders from Prince Leon regarding the Schubaltz family, implying that Kane had not been ordered to protect them. Archibald's face twisted into a manic grin as he declared that the entire situation was a conspiracy, a direct defiance of the royal family's will. His men continued their assault, and Archibald, emboldened, proclaimed this a righteous battle to defeat the Schubaltz family for defying the royal family's orders. He asserted that with such a grand cause, he could seize their territory for himself. Ellis confronted Archibald once more, warning him that many people would be harmed by his actions. He merely laughed maniacally, dismissing her concerns and stating that as long as he was fine, nothing else mattered. A chilling realization dawned on Ellis as she understood the true depth of his depravity. She recoiled, her face contorted in disgust as Archibald, with a cruel grin, continued to taunt her. He declared that the time for revenge had arrived, dismissing her pleas and stating his intention to enjoy her suffering, especially that of the exiled saintess. Despite her distress, Ellis stood firm, questioning if Archibald's words were all he had to say. She defiantly stated that she would not surrender if it meant bringing harm to her family, the Schubalt's household. Around them, Gordon's men cheered wildly for their leader, their faces alight with savage glee. Meanwhile, Sylvia, observing the unfolding confrontation, gasped in disbelief. She questioned what was being said, wondering if they truly intended to fight using only a spell as seemingly minor as Petit Fire. She knew that Gordon and his subordinates were formidable, having trained in magic, but she doubted their ability to withstand the full force of the Schubalt's family's defenses. Archibald, overhearing the mention of the spell, scoffed. He mocked the idea of using Petit Fire, a spell he considered so weak and insignificant, especially against a genius mage like himself. He wondered if the girl had grown overconfident after her monster subjugation with Cain. Ellis, her eyes wide with anger, demanded to know who Archibald thought he was, daring to speak ill of Cain. She warned him that Cain was far stronger than he imagined and would never allow such a despicable act. Archibald, however, merely laughed, claiming that Gordon was now his beloved subordinate and that Cain would never interfere. Suddenly, Sylvia unleashed the Petit Fire spell. A torrent of flames erupted from her, engulfing Archibald's men in a devastating inferno. The air crackled with intense heat and light as the spell consumed everything in its path. Archibald cried out in shock and pain as the flames reached him, his smug expression replaced by one of terror and disbelief. The Petit Fire spell continued its destructive path, incinerating Archibald's forces with overwhelming power. The ground itself seemed to ripple under the intense heat, leaving a trail of devastation. Ellis watched, wide-eyed and astonished, as the flames raged. She could only utter a surprised sound, overwhelmed by the sheer power of the magic Sylvia had just unleashed. Ellis, still reeling from the sudden display of power, heard Archibald's furious shouts. He was enraged by Sylvia's magic, demanding to know what kind of sorcery it was, dismissing it as the work of a fake saintess. Gordon, equally incensed, screamed for her to be killed. Ellis, however, internally questioned the true nature of Sylvia's magic, recognizing its immense range and power, far beyond what even a high-ranking court mage could typically wield. She continued to observe the unfolding chaos, noting that Archibald's men were now preparing to engage. She heard one of them declare that there was no holding back, implying they would use full force against Sylvia. Suddenly, a powerful, unseen force erupted, striking Archibald's men. They were thrown backward, their bodies contorting as if hit by an invisible wave of energy. The impact continued to ripple through the ranks, sending more of Archibald's men flying through the air. Ellis watched, her eyes wide with disbelief, as the sheer force of the attack overwhelmed them. She could vaguely discern Sylvia in the background, seemingly the source of this devastating power. The ground itself seemed to explode as the men were violently flung in every direction, some crashing into the earth, others sent tumbling through the air. Amidst the chaos, Ellis spotted Cain, also caught in the blast, being thrown. Her shock turned to alarm as she cried out his name. Gordon, his face contorted in a snarl, lunged forward, shouting a furious accusation. Archibald, standing nearby, watched with a mix of surprise and apprehension as his men recoiled, clearly intimidated by Gordon's raw power. Amidst the chaos, Cain stood firm, his sword a blur as he effortlessly cut down Archibald's approaching men. He declared his intent to kill them all, his voice ringing with unwavering resolve. His eyes, sharp and focused, reflected the intensity of the battle, betraying no hesitation. He continued to parry and strike, a lone figure surrounded by a multitude of attackers, each movement precise and deadly. With a powerful swing, Cain unleashed a devastating sword technique, creating a shockwave that scattered his opponents like dust. Archibald, witnessing the display, could only stare in disbelief, recognizing the sheer power behind the attack. Archibald, still reeling from the shock, demanded to know who he was, calling him a bastard Cain Schult. Cain confirmed his identity, warning Archibald not to forget his face, and accused him of laying hands on Ellis and Sylvia. He vowed to drag Archibald down to hell for his transgressions. As the battle raged, Cain received a system notification. He had gained proficiency in swordsmanship, and his skill had leveled up to 4, increasing his accuracy and attack power by 40%. Archibald, now thoroughly enraged by Cain's defiance and unexpected strength, let out a frustrated shout, acknowledging the young lord's surprising capabilities. He then extended his arms, casting a powerful spell that enveloped his surrounding men in a magical aura, granting them both double enhancement and fire resistance magic. Archibald, now confident in his bolstered forces, explained to Cain that while Gordon was a powerful magic user in the original game, he himself was a genius for being able to cast such extensive buffs on so many people at once. His men, emboldened by the magic, laughed boisterously, confident in their enhanced strength. He scoffed, declaring that it was foolish to think fire attribute magic would work against his specialized forces, who were now resistant to it. He asserted that any such magic would be useless against them, dismissing his opponents as mere small fry. Meanwhile, one of his buffed soldiers stood protectively in front of Ellis and Sylvia, apologizing to Ellis and vowing to protect her. Despite Archibald's boasts, Kane calmly countered, stating that it was not quite so simple. He then internally reflected on Sylvia's unique abilities, realizing that her Aldous Fire was not a defensive magic, and its immense power and difficulty to control meant that humans could not normally wield it. He concluded that she had been unable to use it until now. He reassured Sylvia, telling her not to intervene. Just as the tension mounted, a voice called out, "Young Lord Kane." Lancelot, the butler, suddenly appeared, charging into the midst of Archibald's forces, his sword ablur as he struck down several men. Kane's voice then declared that he had brought people to help this time. He moved with incredible speed and precision, deflecting a massive axe swing with his sword, all while positioning himself to shield Ellis and Sylvia from the onslaught of Archibald's men. Kane observed the scene, a silent witness to Lancelot's formidable skill. Meanwhile, Kane himself engaged the enemy, his sword flashing as he moved through the ranks of Archibald's buffed soldiers, a whirlwind of focused strikes. He continued his relentless assault, his movements fluid and deadly, cutting down more of Archibald's men as blood splattered around him. After the initial skirmish, Kane turned to Lancelot, instructing him to provide support for the two women and to defeat Gordon. Lancelot, with a confident smile, readily accepted the command. Lancelot then commented on Kane's incredible physical potential, noting that his body was already capable of running nearly 20 kilometers without issue. He wondered if Kane had been running 20 kilometers every day without realizing it, and Kane confirmed that his goal had been to escape from enemies. He also noted that Sylvia had been accompanying him every day until the very end of his runs, along with Ash and the small creature. Meanwhile, Archibald's remaining men were utterly stunned by Lancelot's appearance and skill. One of them exclaimed in disbelief, asking if he was truly Lancelot, the former vice-captain of the Royal Knights, the legendary knight who bore the name of the strongest in the kingdom. Lancelot simply bowed, acknowledging their surprise. Lancelot, with a fierce and unwavering expression, declared his absolute loyalty to Kane, proclaiming himself a true embodiment of chivalry. He asserted that a truly strong man, like Kane, strives endlessly to protect those he loves. Archibald, witnessing this fervent declaration, recoiled in shock, his face contorted in disbelief and fear. His shock intensified as Lancelot continued, stating that he had been ordered by Kane's father to ensure Lancelot never turned against him. Archibald, still reeling, could only stammer in disbelief, while Kane observed the scene with a calm, almost indifferent expression, remarking internally that he had no particular interest in chivalry. Lancelot then drew his sword, its blade gleaming, and challenged Archibald's men to face him if they dared, reiterating his unwavering devotion to Kane. He declared that his loyalty was pledged to the young lord, and as a knight commanded to protect him, he would fulfill that mission to the very end. Archibald and his remaining men visibly flinched, their faces etched with terror. As Lancelot's resolve became clear, Archibald's men screamed in terror and began to flee, abandoning their posts. Kane, observing their panicked retreat, called out to them, questioning if they truly believed they could escape after repeatedly engaging in such cowardly acts of banditry. Moments later, a powerful, unseen force swept through the fleeing ranks, striking down several of Archibald's men with brutal efficiency. Kane watched, his expression calm, realizing that there was no need to even speak to these individuals who had attempted to harm Sylvia and Ellis. Archibald, witnessing the swift defeat of his forces, shrieked in desperation, ordering his remaining men to protect him and not to flee. He frantically offered a bonus of 10 gold coins to anyone who could defeat Kane Schwartz. In response to Archibald's desperate plea, a few of his men, driven by greed or fear, turned to face Kane. He stood ready, his posture relaxed but alert, as they cautiously approached him. The men lunged, wielding axes and swords, but Kane moved with incredible speed and precision. He effortlessly parried their attacks, deflecting blows with a casual grace that sent shockwaves through their bodies. He continued his counteroffensive, striking with such force that his opponents were sent flying, their weapons useless against his skill. The battle was less a struggle and more a demonstration of overwhelming power. With a final, blinding flash of impact, Kane dispatched the last of his immediate attackers. One man lay on the ground, terrified and missing several teeth, while Kane stood over him, his expression utterly calm and composed, his eyes sharp and focused. He stood amidst the fallen, his sword still in hand, contemplating the battle. The additional dark attribute damage from the Sword of the Black Moon was a concern. He realized his movements were too slow and inefficient. If he failed to prevent that extra damage, he would surely take a life. As the dust settled from the previous skirmish, he turned to face a new, larger contingent of Archibald's men, including the imposing figure of Gordon. He declared that he would let them live, so they might atone for their sins. Kane stood amidst several defeated training partners, their forms sprawled across the grassy field. Lancelot, the butler, observed the scene with a knowing gaze. Kane, however, was lost in thought, reflecting on Ellis, who did not exist in the world of the game he once knew. He wondered if perhaps she had been summoned to this world as well. His mind drifted to a memory of Ellis, who had always supported him, praising his strength and calling him cool. He recalled how she had quickly become a mother figure to him and his siblings, embracing him and filling the void left by his own mother. Suddenly, the memory shattered as Archibald, consumed by rage, unleashed a powerful fireball spell. He swore he would never forgive anyone who dared to harm Ellis, his fury evident in his contorted expression as Cain watched from below. Cain, however, merely smirked. He understood the trajectory of the incoming attack. If he were to dodge, the fireball would strike Ellis directly. She watched with a look of growing concern. Instead of evading, he met the onslaught head-on, deflecting multiple fireballs with his sword as they exploded harmlessly around him. Ellis gasped, her eyes wide with shock at the display. Archibald stared in disbelief, his face contorted in a scream of frustration as his fireballs were utterly nullified. Ellis, meanwhile, smiled, a sense of relief washing over her. It was then revealed that this was the effect of Cain's unique skill, the Sword of the Black Moon, which allowed him to interfere with and negate magic. Archibald, still reeling from the shock, turned to Lancelot, demanding to know why he had never been informed of such a crucial ability. Lancelot calmly explained that the combination of the Sword of the Black Moon and the skill bullet rendered both magic and projectiles useless against Cain. He concluded that the only way to defeat young Lord Cain was through close-quarters combat. Enraged by this revelation, Archibald roared and charged forward, his men following close behind, determined to overcome Cain through sheer force. As Archibald's men swarmed him, Cain moved with practiced ease, deflecting their attacks and striking back. His opponents cried out in disbelief, questioning how a mere noble could possess such overwhelming strength. He stood amidst the defeated, as Archibald, enraged and humiliated, screamed threats. Archibald vowed to report Cain to Prince Leon for daring to injure his men and disregard royal orders, while one of his fallen soldiers, battered and bruised, pleaded for mercy. Archibald continued his furious tirade, questioning if Cain truly believed he could escape the consequences of his actions. Unfazed, Cain delivered a swift kick to another of Archibald's men, who cried out in pain. He then mused aloud, surprised by the sensation, remarking that even his own father had never struck him. With all of Archibald's men now incapacitated, Cain surveyed the scene, noting how easily they had fallen. Meanwhile, in a separate location, Lancelot approached a merchant, acquiring a wooden crate filled with numerous scrolls. Moments later, Cain held one of the scrolls in his mouth, looking down at the defeated Archibald. Lancelot stood nearby, holding a large stack of identical scrolls. Cain then directly addressed Archibald, asking if he would be willing to become his slave. He recalled the mechanics of the game, Apocalypse, where the slave contract scroll was an essential item. It was the key to forming the strongest private army, one that would be absolutely obedient to its master. Cain explained to Archibald that he had purchased over 100 of these scrolls, confident that a noble like him would be familiar with their purpose. He then instructed Archibald and his men to sign the contracts, warning them that any defiance of his orders after signing would result in a curse of excruciating, potentially fatal, pain. Archibald reacted with a guttural cry of horror. He continued, reminding them that in this world, those defeated in battle were often either enslaved or executed. Nobles, especially high-ranking ones, were valuable assets. Cain revealed his intention to use their wealth to fund his army. He then internally reflected on the game's mechanics, where capturing and enslaving nobles offered significant advantages, and the higher their loyalty or obedience, the stronger they would become. Lancelot, observing Cain's actions, considered the intricacies of the slave system. He knew that if a slave's loyalty dropped below 10, they would attempt to escape, but maintaining it at the maximum of 100 ensured absolute obedience. He also mused that Cain was offering these bandits a chance at life as slave soldiers, a fate far kinder than the usual execution for such crimes. He then indulged in a private thought, envisioning himself as a beautiful girl slave harem king. Cain, with a resolute expression, declared that if he were to entrust Sylvia's protection to anyone else, they would surely betray him. He revealed his true desire, to protect Sylvia, whom he knew to be the saintess of the world tree, without ever exposing her secret. The defeated men watched him, their faces etched with fear. He further explained that he had acquired the slave contract scrolls from a pharmacist merchant. Cain deduced that Archibald and his men had originally intended to capture Sylvia and Ellis, binding them with these very slave contracts. He concluded that Archibald must have received intelligence from merchants about bandits gathering, and, thinking he could gain favor, rushed to the scene, only to find Sylvia and Ellis already there. He had indeed thought far ahead, a realization that dawned on Ellis with wide-eyed astonishment. She gasped, understanding that Cain had planned this entire strategy to protect the people of his domain. Her companions, Lancelot and Sylvia, also watched the unfolding scene. Archibald, still kneeling, desperately pleaded for mercy, begging to be spared. He reminded them of his status as the first son of Count Orbal, warning that enslaving him would surely lead to war with the Orbal family. His pleas fell on deaf ears. Cain, his expression unyielding, held out the slave contract scroll and a quill, stating plainly that he had no qualms about a war with the Orbal family. He warned Archibald that if he refused to sign, he would die on the spot. Trembling with fear, Archibald began to sign the document. The quill scratched across the parchment as Archibald, his face contorted in distress, completed the slave contract. Cain stood over him, observing the forced submission. He considered the implications of the contract, knowing it guaranteed absolute obedience. He mused that no one would ever speak of what transpired here, and he had no intention of giving unreasonable orders to his new subordinates. As he finished his thoughts, Archibald remained in a state of terror, his eyes wide with fear. Cain explained that the contract meant they would eventually have to confront the royal army and Prince Leon, and when that time came, the Orbal family would be compelled to provide aid. The implications of Cain's words settled heavily upon him. Meanwhile, Gordon, having also signed the contract, knelt before Cain and declared his absolute loyalty. A chilling truth was now undeniable. They could never refuse Cain's orders, for to ignore them would invite an unbearable, agonizing pain. Ellis, her face beaming with joy, expressed her heartfelt gratitude to Cain, acknowledging his help. Nearby, Ash, visibly distressed, cried out that she was terrified, but held on to the belief that Cain would ultimately emerge victorious. Sylvia, having arrived, apologized for her tardiness. She then explained to Cain that Ellis was safe, attributing her protection to the Albedos fire magic he had taught her. She mused on the profound strength required to defend oneself in such critical moments. Sylvia confirmed that the fire magic she wielded was indeed taught by Cain. He then turned his attention to the two captured men, declaring his intention to force them all into signing slave contracts. Standing before a vast assembly of kneeling individuals, Cain presented them with a grim ultimatum: choose death or servitude. He then clarified that he would not kill them, implying their only true option was submission. He moved among the kneeling men, who were now in the process of signing various documents. Lancelot stood silently behind him, observing the proceedings. He issued his first command to Gordon, instructing him to spread rumors that Sylvia had been abused by him, and to report this fabricated story to both the Schultz family and the royal family. He then added, with disdain, that Count Orbel was nothing but a fool. Lancelot, Ellis, and Sylvia watched in astonishment at Cain's cunning plan. Lancelot exclaimed that Cain was truly incredible, possessing not only the qualities of a warrior and a lord, but also demonstrating political acumen far beyond his apparent age. With a confident smile, he declared that from this day forward, they would be known as the Schultz Army. He immediately commanded them to return to the Schultz territory and begin a rigorous training regimen, swinging their swords 1,000 times. He continued to address the kneeling men, sternly forbidding them from dying. He proclaimed their ultimate goal was to become the strongest army in the world, one capable of surpassing even the formidable Imperial Guard of the Atlas Empire. The men reacted with stunned expressions. With a wide, almost maniacal grin, he asserted that if they followed his instructions, they would undoubtedly achieve victory and be capable of defeating S-rank monsters within half a year. He declared this to be a brutal training regimen, specifically designed to forge them into the strongest soldiers, which would, in turn, significantly increase the efficiency of monster subjugation. Approximately 2 months later, he had successfully trained the Schultz army, composed of the former bandits, to confront high-risk monsters. The training grounds, once a desolate area, now teemed with activity, resembling a vibrant play world. Thanks to his efforts, all the soldiers had surpassed level 5, a strength comparable to C-rank adventurers. He had also ensured they mastered 3 crucial skills: sword skill level, pharmacist level, and magic bullet level. Following this intensive training, the Schultz army paraded through the town, met with an overwhelming wave of cheers from the populace. The townspeople, once wary, now hailed them as heroes, shouting praises for Cain and his newly formed legion. The enthusiasm was palpable. A young boy in the crowd declared his aspiration to join Cain's ranks once he grew older, while others expressed their unwavering confidence that any monster would be easily dealt with as long as Cain was present. Amidst the adulation, Cain acknowledged his popularity, but his attention turned to Ellis, who remained chained beside him. He gently patted her head, thanking her for her continuous efforts, noting that Sylvia, too, had diligently followed his instructions for 5 months, focusing solely on fire magic. He mused that Sylvia must be close to acquiring a new skill, a condition he had set for her. He reflected on his own progress, his level now at 31, while Sylvia stood at 25. He felt a surge of anticipation, knowing that with just a little more effort, he would be capable of defeating S-rank monsters, and his own level would skyrocket. Meanwhile, 2 of the former bandits, now soldiers in the Schultz army, conversed amongst themselves. One expressed disbelief, remarking that in this world, death was the end, and impatience was forbidden. He found it incredible that they, once despised mountain bandits, were now considered heroes of the town. Cain observed the former bandits, now his soldiers, who were overjoyed. They cheered, exclaiming their happiness at being Cain's slaves, receiving 3 meals a day, and sleeping in warm rooms. He noted that most of them were either impoverished farmers, third sons, or runaway soldiers, and it seemed they had endured considerable hardship. He then addressed the crowd, his voice firm. He declared that he was a wicked noble, treating Sylvia like a slave and forcing her to fight dangerous monsters. He then turned to Ellis, reminding everyone not to forget that she was his favorite slave. With a menacing grin, he proclaimed that all his actions were for the glory and prosperity of his house, the Schultz earldom. Ellis, looking startled, could only respond with a meek, "Yes, Lord Cain. Please do your best." Cain's expression shifted as he overheard murmurs from the crowd. They questioned his character, wondering if he truly was a wicked noble, especially after hearing him speak of sending a young girl to the front lines just moments before. He was still processing the public's mixed reactions when his attention was drawn to Sylvia, who was surrounded by several townspeople. They expressed their gratitude, with one man exclaiming that they were once again saved by young Lady Sylvia's powerful fire attack. Another praised both her and her husband for bravely confronting monsters, unlike other useless nobles. However, a third townsperson remarked to Sylvia that while it might be true they were called husband and wife, it still felt a bit excessive. Yet another voice chimed in, acknowledging Sylvia as an amazing magic user. As these words reached him, Cain remained silent, his expression unreadable, a single bead of sweat tracing his temple. Ellis clung to Kane, her face alight with determination as she declared her intent to become more useful to him, even as the surrounding townsfolk murmured their admiration for Sylvia. Kane, however, seemed overwhelmed by her fervent display. He averted his gaze, a bead of sweat trickling down his temple, as he internally acknowledged Sylvia's happiness, but felt that his own actions were far from deserving of such praise. Ellis, still clinging to him, then asked what kind of medicine Kane desired, explaining that the townsfolk had requested a love potion from Sylvia, which she had successfully created. Kane, startled, realized that the potion was indeed the work of the elf pharmacist, Lil. She then offered to use the potion on him, suggesting it would make him fall madly in love with Sylvia. Kane recoiled in horror, vehemently refusing the idea, especially when Ellis clarified that the potion would make him kiss Sylvia without hesitation. The townsfolk watched the exchange, their expressions a mix of curiosity and amusement, as Kane and Ellis continued their public display. Ellis, undeterred, declared her intention to make Kane fall for her instead, using the potion to make him lose his mind with love for her. Kane, exasperated, could only sigh in response to her persistent antics. She then turned to the onlookers, proudly proclaiming that she and Kane were a loving couple, much to Kane's mortification. He internally lamented that the townsfolk would surely misunderstand their relationship, especially with her wearing the collar he had given her. Kane, attempting to regain some control, suggested they embark on a two-person monster subjugation quest in the mistletoe mine to level up, hoping to distract her. Ellis, however, misinterpreted his suggestion, excitedly asking if it meant they would be alone together, her hands clasped in delight. Meanwhile, Lancelot and the maids observed the scene, Lancelot appearing concerned. He then considered the mistletoe mine, a hidden dungeon known for its powerful monsters, where defeating them efficiently could yield high-purity mistletoe, Oregon. He mused that enhanced recovery effects would be possible with such resources. Suddenly, Lancelot approached, calling out to him with an urgent expression. Kane turned to Lancelot, who informed him of an urgent magic communication from Prince Leon, which his father was currently handling. Ellis, overhearing, gasped and questioned the nature of the urgent matter. The urgent news had indeed arrived, detailing a massive undead outbreak near the royal capital. A subjugation order had been issued for Sylvia's father, Ferdinand, and the Schubalt's family was being asked for support. Kane's father, a stern man, discussed the implications with Lancelot and a guard, while Ellis listened intently. As the gravity of the situation settled, Ellis cried out to Kane's father, revealing that Prince Leon was using legal methods to corner Sylvia's father, effectively trying to drive him to ruin. Kane listened, his expression grim. Meanwhile, the architect of this scheme, Prince Leon, sat in contemplation. He acknowledged that this was a move against the Schubalt's family, a strategy he himself had orchestrated. Yet, he felt a growing unease as he noticed the two families were becoming closer. Back with Kane, Lancelot approached him, informing him that Prince Leon wished to speak. Kane, with a knowing look, responded that the timing was perfect, as this was all part of his plan. He gently patted Ellis's head, who, still looking worried, apologized for causing so much trouble for his father. He reassured her, stating that he would manage Sylvia's predicament and that she shouldn't worry. His first direct confrontation with Prince Leon was about to begin. The Grand Royal Palace stood majestically, its imposing architecture a testament to the power it housed. Inside, a lavish staircase led to a grand hall where Kane's father stood at the top, calling out to him. He stood before Prince Leon, who appeared as a projection within a magical orb, seated regally. Kane's father, looking distressed, informed him that His Highness was extremely displeased. His father, a loyal servant of the crown, then questioned Kane, asking if he was listening to the rumors about the two families becoming too close. Kane remained silent, his gaze lowered in thought. Observing the remote conversation through the glowing orb, Kane witnesses his father being pressed by Prince Leon. The prince suggests Kane has been disregarding his orders, his tone accusatory, and states he has been waiting for Kane's father to directly address the matter. Kane's father, visibly distressed, sweats under the pressure. He then speaks, a slight smile playing on his lips, confirming that he is indeed diligently following the prince's orders each day. However, he adds that he has also been actively engaging in monster subjugation, extracting spirits. He reveals his understanding of the prince's true intent, to slowly corner and torment him. As Kane's words hang in the air, Prince Leon, still observing, presses Kane's father further. He demands an explanation for the Fernan family's presence within his territory, then asserts that the Fernan family is already held in contempt by other nobles for having produced a fake saintess. Kane, his gaze still fixed on the orb, calmly interjects, clarifying that the Count of Schwartz is not implicated in these matters. Prince Leon's expression twists into a sinister smile. He declares his intention to inflict such pain upon Sylvia that her face will become distorted, promising to do so directly before Kane's eyes. He warns that he will not cease his actions until Kane himself begs him to stop. Prince Leon, seated, dismisses Kane's earlier words as foolish. He suggests that Kane's concern for Sylvia, the elf pharmacist, is merely a desire to inflict despair upon a girl he admires, rather than a genuine concern for her well-being. Kane listens, his expression unreadable but serious. He continues, his tone mocking, stating that if he truly wished to kill Sylvia or inflict suffering upon her, it would be a trivial matter, not worth his time. Kane's eyes narrow, a flicker of intense anger visible beneath his calm facade as he clenches his fist. Prince Leon then confirms that he has already heard the butler's report and has given orders to Count Fernan to deal with the undead. He He clarifies that he would never strike Sylvia himself, but that the current situation, with the capital still unprepared for war, means that the conflict has already begun. He explains that the recent surge of ferocious monsters appearing frequently around the capital is a consequence of the playthrough world influencing the region. He reveals that this is all part of a plan to frame Sylvia, the false saintess, for the crimes of Count Fernand, her own father, who has been ordered to act as a scapegoat. Cain, now seated, listens with a grave expression. Cain asks for permission to pose a question, inquiring if Prince Leon intends to tacitly approve the rampant undead activity in the royal capital's vicinity. Prince Leon, with a dismissive wave, confirms that he has no intention of intervening, implying that the commoners' lives are inconsequential. Cain reflects on the grim reality. The undead are multiplying, and those killed by them are also turning into undead, creating a vicious cycle of increasing casualties. He recalls that historically, entire nations have been destroyed by such undead outbreaks, and to allow this to happen near the capital is an act of utter foolishness. Prince Leon, with a smirk, dismisses the commoners' plight, stating that as long as the royal capital's walls hold, there is no problem. He scoffs at the idea of thousands of commoners being killed like insects, finding no issue with it. Cain, his expression hardened, internally labels the prince as utterly foolish. He realizes that while he thought he understood the game's scenario well, the reality of Prince Leon's depravity far exceeded his imagination. Cain resolves that it is his role to defeat Prince Leon, the hero Abel, and vows to crush him soon. Meanwhile, Cain's father, seated across from him, makes him promise that the Schwartz family will not interfere in this matter. Cain bows deeply, acknowledging his father's words and affirming his loyalty as a humble servant of Prince Leon. His father expresses relief, stating that he feels at ease hearing such words from Cain. He bowed before Prince Leon, who, with a cruel smirk, declared his intention to drive Sylvia to utter despair and then exploit her remaining arm. Moments later, alone in the vast, opulent room, he realized the full extent of the deception. "Lancelot," he called out, his voice echoing in the silence. The butler appeared promptly, acknowledging his young lord's summons. His father, standing beside him, then instructed Lancelot to immediately summon Gordon from Count Orbel's house. The elder man then turned to him, questioning if he truly intended to involve Count Orbel's house in his plans. He calmly reassured his father not to worry, stating that all preparations were already complete. He reflected on the urgent need to defeat Prince Leon and the Imperial army to rescue Sylvia. His thoughts then turned to the undead outbreaks plaguing Inand, a region where monsters frequently appeared. He considered the possibility of a necromancer being behind the surge, realizing that such a large-scale undead army would be a perfect opportunity to gain experience. With a determined stride, he walked towards a grand estate, internally noting the convenience of rapidly leveling up and the necessity of a boss rush marathon. Meanwhile, Prince Leon arrived on horseback, announcing his presence at the summons of Gordon, the next head of the Orbel family. Inside the estate, he oversaw several armorers diligently working on new equipment, much to the surprise of another noble observing the activity. He then addressed Gordon, who was now present, explaining that they were fabricating armor for Count Orbel's forces to deceive the Schulberg army. Gordon reacted with surprise, while the other noble, utterly bewildered, questioned the meaning of such an elaborate deception. He pondered the implications, wondering if it was truly acceptable to completely crush Count Orbel's house, which had sided with Prince Leon, if it meant saving Sylvia's father, Fernand. He assured Ellis that his plan was sound. Count Orbel's first son, Gordon, had already been named commander for the monster subjugation in the Albion Kingdom. If they were to frame him, no one would suspect a fake. Ellis, however, was horrified, asking if he meant assassination. Cain merely smiled, confirming that Prince Leon would recognize Gordon and undoubtedly send assassins after him. He tried to reassure her, promising to protect her and send his own soldiers as guards. Yet, Ellis remained deeply uneasy, stating she could not feel safe at all. She harbored a thought that Cain might be seeing Gordon in a different light. He continued to outline his strategy, explaining that he and Sylvia would disguise themselves and join Gordon's subordinates. Gordon, he added, would formally become the commander of their unit, the Fernand Viscount's army. Ellis's eyes widened in utter horror at this revelation. Ellis, still reeling from the implications, exclaimed that if Gordon succeeded, he would become a hero. She questioned Cain, asking if he truly intended to make Gordon a hero. Cain clarified that he had no intention of making Gordon a hero in the long term, as it would cause problems for him. Ellis, still confused, pressed him for a clearer explanation. He then stated his true intention. He would make Gordon a hero, but only to then crush him completely. Ellis, finally grasping the ruthless cunning of his plan, was shocked. She praised Cain's strategy, acknowledging its exceptional brilliance. Cain, with a confident smirk, then informed her that she would be the one to assist him in this intricate scheme. Ellis, blushing and flustered, questioned if she was truly capable of such a task. Cain, still smirking, assured her that she was the only one who could do it. He added that Gordon was an optimistic fool, which made him the perfect target. Ellis, still blushing, looked at Cain with a mix of admiration and apprehension. Ellis, still overwhelmed, expressed her fear of dying. Cain, however, dismissed her concerns, stating that everything would be fine. Just then, Lancelot announced that 100 mithril swords had been prepared for Cain. Ellis was astonished, questioning the sheer number and the precious material. Cain explained that these mithril swords were the trump card of the Schubaltz family. He stated that if all his soldiers were equipped with such powerful weapons, they would not fear any monster, thus compensating for their numerical disadvantage. Ellis, still surprised, watched as Kane smiled confidently, his plan now backed by formidable armaments. The 10th chapter began with a small, ethereal figure exclaiming in awe at the sheer number of completed items, marveling at how many had already been finished. Meanwhile, the butler informed Selvia that only the swords were ready for now, but that mithril armor would eventually be produced and distributed to Kane's troops. Gordon, overhearing this, expressed his delight and anticipation. Kane, holding one of the newly forged mithril swords, was utterly astonished. He questioned how such powerful weapons could be equipped by mere soldiers, suggesting they were fit for the Imperial Guard of the Atlas Empire. He then wondered how many mithril swords had been produced, realizing the immense cost required to equip so many with the rare material. He continued to express his disbelief, noting that all the soldiers were also acquiring swordsmanship level 2 to fully draw out the mithril's performance. As Kane reeled from the revelations, the butler reassured him, stating that Lancelot had been rigorously trained for 2 months. Kane, still processing the information, reacted with a surprised exclamation at the mention of Lancelot. Gordon chuckled, remarking that it was truly splendid to hear that Lancelot had not run away and had been pushed to his absolute limits. Kane, observing the exhausted soldiers collapsed on the ground, acknowledged that while it was a formidable force, it still fell short of his ideal army. Moments later, the butler approached Kane, holding a magnificent sword, and noted that Kane's preparations seemed to be progressing well. Kane's eyes widened in surprise as he focused on the ornate sword the butler presented, its hilt intricately detailed. The butler offered the sword to Kane, instructing him to take it, explaining that this blade would protect him. Kane, still wide-eyed, reached out to grasp the weapon. As Kane held the sword, he gazed at his own reflection in its polished surface, a look of wonder on his face as he murmured, "This is..." He, holding the ornate sword, expressed his gratitude to his father. The butler clarified that this was no mere mithril blade. It was enchanted to increase attack power by 10% and granted an additional +10 bonus. Astonished, he questioned if such a thing was truly possible. The butler, with a grave expression, affirmed that the fate of 2 houses, indeed, the entire country, rested on Kane's shoulders, and such a weapon was entirely fitting for him. Gordon, observing the exchange, remarked on the magnificent sword. He noted that an item granting a +10 attack bonus would undoubtedly require vast quantities of precious materials for its creation. Kane, his face flushed with a mix of awe and gratitude, acknowledged the immense value of the gift. He admired the gleaming blade, recognizing it as a truly reliable companion, a weapon that transcended the simple mechanics of a game. The butler then turned to Kane, his expression firm, and instructed him to return alive, bringing Selvia with him. He added that he and Elise would be waiting for his safe return. Suddenly, a loud, excited voice called out Kane's name. Elise, a young woman with voluminous blonde hair, burst into the room, her eyes wide with surprise and joy, while Kane looked on, startled by her sudden appearance. Still full of boundless energy, she playfully leaped onto a nearby cart, her movements light and uninhibited, as Kane and the other onlookers watched her antics. Elise, now close to Kane, excitedly declared that Lil and Ash had prepared a large quantity of enhanced recovery potions for him, causing him to gasp in shock at the unexpected provision. She then threw her arms around him in a tight, affectionate embrace, insisting that he absolutely must return alive. Selvia watched the emotional farewell, a small, knowing smile gracing her lips, as Elise confirmed her understanding to Kane. He watched as Elise, beaming with pride, presented a small bag, exclaiming that the enhanced recovery potions she had prepared with Lil were a truly good job. She boasted that even a 4-limb loss could be instantly recovered, a testament to her teacher's skill. Meanwhile, Selvia reflected internally that thanks to Lil's guidance, her own pharmacist skill had reached level 2. She also noted that Ash was similarly learning pharmacist level 2 under Lil's tutelage, highlighting Lil's expertise. Elise then turned to Kane, holding out another small, wrapped item. She announced with triumph that she had finally succeeded in developing the poison he had requested, a task that had proven quite difficult to adjust. She proudly added that it was a collaborative effort with her brother. He reacted with visible shock, his eyes wide as he stammered, questioning if it was an improved version of that medicine. Elise looked back at him, surprised by his intense reaction. She quickly clarified, exclaiming that it was not that medicine at all. Instead, it was a poison designed to subtly dissolve clothes, intended for use when meeting his fiancé's father. She then pondered aloud, wondering what kind of pervert would even carry such a thing, as Kane broke out in a cold sweat, utterly horrified. With the peculiar preparations complete, he, Selvia, and Lil bowed deeply to Elise. Kane then declared that all was ready, and they would now depart for the royal capital. Elise, with a confident gesture, instructed Lancelot to accompany them on their journey. The journey began, traversing a vast, open landscape. From this border region, it was understood that even by the fastest means, it would take approximately 10 days to reach the royal capital. As they pressed on, the urgency of their mission weighed heavily. A warning echoed. If they did not arrive swiftly and commence the subjugation, the undead threat would multiply even further, growing beyond control. Lancelot, now in full armor, stood alongside another soldier, gazing out at the path ahead, his expression grim and resolute as they prepared to face the impending dangers. At a fortified gate, a soldier demanded to know the identity of the approaching mounted party. The leader of the riders, clad in a full-face helmet, declared that they were soldiers of the Archibald family. Kane, riding behind the helmeted leader, looked visibly distressed. The leader, who was Gordon, then explained their mission, to subjugate the troublesome undead plaguing the royal capital's vicinity, acting under the direct authority of Count Archibald. Kane, still looking anxious, acknowledged Gordon's statement. Gordon then asserted his identity as the son of Count Archibald, demanding passage. One of the gate guards, recognizing the distinctive Archibald family crest, gasped in surprise. Despite the recognition, a gate guard stated he had no knowledge of such orders. Gordon's forces, however, continued to advance, claiming their purpose was to aid Viscount Fernand, who was being overwhelmed by the undead, a mission driven by pure chivalry. Gordon, his eyes narrowed with conviction behind his helmet, declared that to refuse their entry was to abandon the people and the country itself. Kane remained visibly distressed, his gaze fixed on Gordon. Suddenly, Kane's anxiety erupted into a frantic shout, demanding the gate be opened immediately. Lancelot, one of the older gate guards, quickly apologized for the delay. A relieved smile spread across Kane's face as the gate guards began to laboriously open the heavy, barred entrance. Gordon's mounted forces streamed through the now open gate. Unbeknownst to these frontier soldiers, Prince Leon had secretly issued an order for the assassination of Viscount Fernand, a directive that had not reached their ears. He dismisses Prince Leon's inaction, declaring that Kane, as Viscount Schultz, is the true noble worthy of praise. Kane, however, is utterly distraught, screaming that he wants no such praise. Still reeling from Gordon's words, Kane looks on in shock as a masked figure on horseback leads a contingent of Archibald soldiers through the gate. The masked figure calls out to him. The masked figure, now revealed to be Kane himself in full armor, apologizes for his previous words, stating that he is now under the command of the other Kane. He then warns his past self not to utter his name during this campaign. The armored Kane then declares that they have successfully passed through the checkpoint. Meanwhile, Selvia, observing the situation, remarks with a bright smile that Kane is also skilled in rhetoric. Kane, now in a more reflective state, considers the plight of the frontier soldiers, who must be suffering greatly from the dangerous undead legions they are forced to ignore. He continues to ponder, realizing that the prince, despite his position, lacked the necessary charisma or leadership to inspire such loyalty. As he thinks, the Archibald forces continue their advance. 2 days later, the Archibald forces, led by the armored Kane, press deeper into the territory. The armored Kane declares that if they break through this point, they will reach the royal capital. As they traverse the dense forest, the masked Kane observes Selvia, who now wears a hooded cloak. He notes that this forest, usually a dangerous den of monsters, is passable because Selvia, the saintess of the world tree, is with them. Kane, still reflecting, realizes that unlike a game, the kingdom of Albion is quite complex. He considers that in a game, ruins or abandoned villages might have been visible on the way to the capital from the frontier, but here, Selvia's presence allows them to pass through the monster-infested forest without encountering any. Selvia, looking at the masked Kane, asks him what he was doing before the main story of the game began. He responds, explaining that Kane taught him about the tree spirits. Her journey through the monster-infested forest was nearing its end, but the path ahead promised no respite. Beyond the dense canopy, the Viscount's camp was reportedly under siege. As they pressed forward, the masked knight urged them to hasten their pace, declaring their immediate objective was to rendezvous with Viscount Fernand. Selvia, riding alongside him, confirmed the correct path. Upon reaching a vantage point, they witnessed a horrifying spectacle. Viscount Fernand's camp was indeed under siege, overwhelmed by a vast undead army. Kane, visibly shaken, questioned the enemy's strength, to which Selvia grimly reported their numbers to be approximately 6,000. The sheer scale of the force left Kane aghast. The masked knight's gaze sharpened, his mind rapidly assessing the dire odds. Viscount Fernand's forces numbered a mere 100, making the undead army 60 times their size. He knew a direct confrontation offered no hope of victory. Still, he spurred his horse onward, wondering if they could possibly arrive in time to make a difference. Behind him, Kane pondered if Selvia's far-seeing magic had truly functioned as intended, given the overwhelming situation. Suddenly, a horrifying sight unfolded before Kane's eyes. The masked knight's horse was drenched in blood, and the knight's armor was splattered with gore. Kane gasped in utter shock. The masked knight, now stained with blood, identified the threat. An S-rank monster, a Dullahan, stood before them. Kane, paralyzed with fear, cried out that it was an impossible foe and urged them to retreat. But the masked knight silenced him with a resolute command, declaring that he alone would defeat the S-rank monster. Without hesitation, the masked knight led the Archibald forces into a full charge, his voice ringing out with a powerful command for a complete assault. The soldiers, galvanized by his resolve, responded with a unified cry of affirmation, ready to demonstrate their strength. His eyes burned with fierce determination, a silent thought echoing his confidence. An S-rank monster, while a formidable threat, was no longer a match for his current power. As the charge intensified, the masked knight called out to his companions, urging them to follow his lead. Kane, his fear now replaced by a surge of resolve, responded with a resounding affirmation, ready to obey. A vast army of armored knights, mounted on horseback, advanced across the land, their numbers stretching far into the distance. Two prominent figures led the charge, their polished armor gleaming under the open sky. Soon, the advance met fierce resistance as countless skeletal undead swarmed the battlefield, clashing violently with the armored soldiers. Swords met bone and shield, creating a chaotic maelstrom of combat. The sheer brutality of the undead was overwhelming. Those who fell in battle quickly rose again, swelling the ranks of the enemy, and crushing the living under their ever-increasing numbers. The armored forces found themselves in a desperate struggle for survival. Amidst the chaos, one knight's eye, visible through the visor of his helmet, widened with a sudden, sharp realization of the overwhelming danger. A desperate cry echoed across the battlefield, a young woman's voice calling out, "Father!" Selvia watched in horror, her eyes wide with terror, as the masked knight, mounted on his steed, raised his sword high above the kneeling, gravely wounded Lancelot. He had fallen, his own sword lying uselessly beside him, his face streaked with blood and grime. The masked knight brought his blade down with brutal force, aiming to deliver a final, fatal blow to the fallen knight. Lancelot grimaced in agony, his face contorted with pain and resignation as the attack descended upon him. Cain, observing the terrifying figure, recognized the foe as a Dullahan, a headless knight, and the strongest class of undead. He internally noted that this S-rank monster's estimated level was likely far above his own level 50. He quickly uncorked a small bottle and drank its contents, a potent medicine developed by Lil. As the liquid coursed through him, a powerful surge of energy erupted, causing his helmet to crack and his body to convulse in a painful transformation. He convulsed as the powerful medicine coursed through his veins, his body rapidly changing. A voice declared the activation of the skill Giant Killing, explaining that when his HP falls below half, his attack power would increase by 100%. His eyes, now framed by a metallic mask, gleamed with fierce resolve. Moments later, the transformed warrior, now clad in full armor and mounted on a powerful steed, burst onto the chaotic battlefield. He charged through the horde of skeletal undead, a blur of motion, his sword cutting down foes as he cried out, "I'm not too late." As the battle raged around him, his masked gaze remained sharp, scanning the chaotic field. The armored figure, now identified as the masked knight, continued his relentless assault against the reanimated corpses. He swiftly intervened, deflecting a devastating blow from the Dullahan that was aimed at the gravely injured Lancelot. The masked knight's powerful strike sent the Dullahan reeling, preventing the final, fatal attack. Lancelot, barely conscious on the ground, looked up in disbelief as the masked knight spoke. He recognized the voice, wondering if it could truly be Cain. The masked knight confirmed his suspicions, announcing, "Yes, Lord Fernand, Cain Schwartz has arrived as reinforcements." The Archibald soldiers, who had been fighting valiantly but desperately, paused in their struggle, their faces etched with surprise and a glimmer of hope as they witnessed the arrival of the new, powerful knight. A murmur spread through their ranks. "What?" one soldier whispered, while another exclaimed, "Could it be Lord Cain, who gave us the mithril?" Their surprise quickly turned to elation as the news spread. A wave of cheers erupted from the Archibald army. Their leader, Fernand, watched the masked knight with a mix of awe and relief, thinking, "Our hero, Lord Cain, has come as reinforcements. Lord Cain, I never thought I'd receive aid from him." The masked knight, now revealed as Cain, knelt beside the wounded Lancelot. He explained that his new mithril sword and armor allowed him to withstand the Dullahan's attacks. Then, with an authoritative tone, he commanded, "Lord Edward, please retreat to the forest. The Schwartz army will take over." Lancelot, addressed by his true name, Edward, stared back at Cain, his expression a mixture of pain and profound surprise. "To the forest?" he questioned, clearly taken aback by the unexpected order. Having issued his command, the masked knight continued his relentless assault, his powerful strike sending an enemy horse recoiling from the impact. A profound realization settled upon him. Selvia was indeed a true saint of the world tree. His gaze, sharp and resolute, remained fixed on the unfolding chaos. With a determined grip, he tightened his hold on his sword, its blade shimmering with an ethereal glow. Meanwhile, Lancelot, still reeling from the masked knight's unexpected order, struggled to comprehend. "What?" he exclaimed, his voice laced with disbelief. "What did he just say?" The masked knight, now a distant figure, rode away, leaving Lancelot bewildered on the battlefield. The masked knight, however, glanced back, his thoughts racing. He urged Lancelot to retreat into the forest, considering Selvia's potential to control plants. He internally acknowledged the immense power he now wielded, a power far surpassing Lancelot's, solidifying his resolve to face the threat alone. Selvia, with a look of determination, began to chant, a complex magic circle forming before her as a horde of skeletal undead, armed with swords and shields, surged forward. She cried out the spell's name, Albetus Fire, her eyes wide with the effort of channeling such power. A blinding flash erupted from the ground, spreading outwards in a devastating way. The light engulfed the advancing skeletons, their forms momentarily silhouetted against the intense magical energy. The spell culminated in a massive, concussive explosion, tearing through the ranks of the undead. In the aftermath, a group of armored soldiers braced themselves, witnessing the destruction wrought by the spell, as more skeletal figures continued to emerge from the smoky distance. Selvia, still reeling from her own powerful magic, looked on in surprise as an armored knight on horseback approached, declaring that they were from House Fernand and had come to assist. She wondered if the immense fire magic had truly been her own doing. Meanwhile, Lancelot, a formidable knight, charged fearlessly into the fray on horseback, his blade cutting down the skeletal warriors. He proclaimed himself Cain's foremost vassal, shouting his own name, Lancelot, as a battle cry. He continued his relentless assault, his horse trampling the undead as he cleaved through them with practiced ease. The other armored soldiers, now fully engaged, stood ready, their expressions grim but resolute as they prepared to face the remaining horde. The armored soldiers watched in awe as the legendary knight, Lancelot, rode into the fray, his blade a swift arc of destruction against the skeletal undead. He continued his relentless charge, shattering the brittle forms of the undead with each powerful swing, even as an endless tide of skeletal warriors stretched across the distant plains. Elsewhere, amidst the chaos, Cain found himself overwhelmed, surrounded by the relentless undead. He cried out in desperation, acknowledging the Archibald family's presence and calling for a fireball to clear the horde. His desperate plea was answered by a blinding flash of light and a colossal magical explosion that erupted, obliterating everything in its path. As the magical energy dissipated, Cain, still mounted, stared in disbelief at the annihilated undead. He realized the immense power of Gordon's magic, acknowledging it as genuine, and wondered if even Lord Archibald possessed such talent. Back with Lancelot, whose face was now streaked with blood and grime from the ongoing battle, he looked up to see Selvia rushing towards him. She called out to him, addressing him as father. He quickly regained his composure, his expression stern, and issued urgent commands to his troops. He ordered them to retreat into the forest, assuring them that it was a safe haven. As he prepared to lead the retreat, one of his loyal soldiers, mounted nearby, declared their unwavering commitment to protect Edward Summa, referring to Lancelot by his true name. The soldiers, following their orders, unleashed a devastating volley of arrows, creating a deadly curtain to cover their retreat. Below them, the seemingly endless horde of undead continued its relentless advance. Despite the arrow fire, the battle remained fierce as the soldiers engaged the remaining undead in close combat, their swords clashing against bone. Still reeling from the retreat, Lancelot observed the unfolding battle, his face grim and smudged with dirt and blood. He was astonished by the prowess of the soldiers before him, realizing they possessed an incredible level of skill to deflect arrows with their swords. He noted their acquisition of arrow deflection, a skill that increased their projectile deflection probability by 50%, and swordsmanship level 2, which boosted their sword skill accuracy by 20%. Meanwhile, one of the armored soldiers, standing confidently, declared that they were young Master Cain's Schwartz soldiers and that there was nothing to fear. A vast army of skeletal undead surged forward, their numbers seemingly endless, overwhelming the landscape. Cain, witnessing the horrifying spectacle, felt a surge of despair, but the Schwartz soldiers around him stood firm, their armored forms resolute. They cried out in defiance, ready to face the encroaching death. As the battle lines drew closer, Cain, mounted alongside his troops, expressed his astonishment. He questioned how these soldiers, whom he had once considered mere rabble, had become so incredibly strong in just 1 month. One of the armored Schwartz soldiers responded, explaining that they had endured a grueling training regimen. He affirmed that if a person was truly determined to die, they could accomplish anything. His words resonated deeply with Cain, who then pondered if Gordon, too, had undergone similar intense training alongside him. Suddenly, a formidable armored knight, Fernand, charged from the flank, striking down a Schwartz soldier. Cain, witnessing the brutal attack, felt a chilling realization. Someone was clearly commanding these undead, and he knew exactly who it was. A cold fury settled over him, and he vowed to kill the perpetrator. He observed the tactical precision of the enemy's movements, noting how they specifically targeted the commanders. This confirmed his suspicion. A necromancer was undoubtedly orchestrating the attack from behind the scenes. Without hesitation, he spurred his horse forward, declaring himself Fernand's true opponent. The two armored knights met in a thunderous clash, their swords ringing out as they engaged in a fierce mounted duel. Cain, with swift precision, brought his blade down, aiming for a decisive strike. His attack connected, sending Fernand reeling back on his horse, the force of the blow evident. He continued his fierce mounted duel against Fernand, their blades clashing with incredible speed and force. Other Schwartz soldiers watched from a distance, marveling at the intensity of the battle, with one exclaiming that the masked knight was truly amazing. They were warned not to interfere, as this was a contest between two formidable warriors. Fernand, consumed by rage, roared his intent to kill, bringing his massive sword down with a devastating overhead strike aimed directly at the masked knight. Within his helmet, the masked knight's eyes narrowed, acknowledging the gravity of the situation. He understood this was no mere skirmish, but a true contest of skill and will. Fernand's powerful downward strike continued its descent, his horse rearing under the immense force of the blow, kicking up dust and debris from the ground. The masked knight, breathing heavily from the exertion, fixed his gaze on the incoming blade, preparing to meet the overwhelming force with his own resolve. Then, with a deafening crash, the two blades met, creating a powerful shockwave that rippled across the battlefield. In a display of masterful swordsmanship, the masked knight executed a defensive technique known as a sword parry, deflecting Fernand's devastating blow with precision. This advanced technique allowed him to redirect the vector of the incoming force, preventing him from taking the full impact. Such a feat required the mastery of sword skill level 5. Having successfully parried the attack, the masked knight seized the momentary opening. He looked up at Fernand, who was now off balance, and delivered a swift, powerful counterattack, striking Fernand's horse. As Fernand's horse collapsed beneath him, the masked knight realized his attack, imbued with the power of the Black Moon, had not felt as impactful as he expected. He understood then that his opponent, as an undead, possessed an extreme resistance to such damage. He unleashed a continuous assault, a technique directly transmitted from Lancelot, known as the Whirlwind Sword. The masked knight's blade became a blur, striking Fernand repeatedly with devastating force. He continued his relentless attack, his face contorted in a scream of pure exertion as he drove his blade into Fernand once more, the impact sending a shockwave of energy across the battlefield. The masked knight's eyes narrowed, reflecting a steely resolve as he prepared for the impending confrontation. He charged forward on horseback, his blade poised. The knight's sword skill level 4 granted him a 40% increase in attack power, further boosted by the giant killing skill, which added another 100%. His mithril sword also contributed a 10% attack power bonus, making his assault devastating. His gaze remained fixed, a silent declaration that he would push through, no matter the obstacle. He watched, surprised, as the headless form of a skeletal undead warrior stood before him, its body cracked and smoking, yet still holding its sword. He felt an unprecedented pressure, a sensation unlike any he had encountered before, yet he continued his relentless charge, his horse kicking up dust. His powerful strike connected, sending a shockwave through the air as he cleaved through another skeletal foe. He maintained his intense focus, even as fragments of the shattered undead flew past him. The skeletal foe's body disintegrated, crumbling into dust and debris under the force of the knight's assault. The knight continued his furious assault, his blade a blur of motion as he cut down multiple skeletal warriors, their forms shattering with each blow. As the last of the undead dissolved into light, his gaze remained sharp and unwavering, ready for whatever came next. He, the masked knight, still mounted on his white steed, surveyed the aftermath of the intense battle. A faint glow lingered in the air, remnants of the powerful magic he had wielded. He remained silent, his gaze fixed on the distant horizon. Moments later, a cheer erupted from the ranks of the Schwartz soldiers. One of the armored leaders, his voice filled with elation, declared that Cain had defeated the enemy general. The soldiers around him echoed the sentiment, their relief palpable. The other soldiers, still processing the victory, expressed their disbelief that an S-rank monster had truly been vanquished. They lauded Cain, acknowledging his exceptional prowess and calling him our Cain-sama. Suddenly, the celebratory mood shattered as a new threat emerged. Another armored leader, his voice laced with urgency, pointed towards a vast, approaching horde. He questioned if this was a wave attack, realizing the enemy had prepared a second, even larger force. The enemy had indeed prepared a second wave, a rearguard intended to engage if Fernand failed to defeat the initial assault. Meanwhile, the masked knight, observing the relentless advance, understood the unique characteristics of the undead. They required no rest and could fight endlessly, a tactical advantage he had to counter. A close-up revealed Cain's unmasked face, his eyes narrowed in intense concentration. He acknowledged the enemy's cunning, thinking to himself that the general was quite formidable. Back among the Schwartz soldiers, Cain, now unmasked and visibly distressed, cried out that the situation was impossible. The sheer number of approaching undead overwhelmed him, causing him to kneel in despair. The masked knight, still mounted, declared that their objective had been achieved and ordered all the soldiers to retreat into the forest. The armored men, though surprised, immediately acknowledged his command. He, now unmasked as Cain, rode his horse, observing the vast skeletal army of over 5,000 undead relentlessly pursuing them. He wondered if they intended to encircle and block their escape route. As they continued their desperate retreat, Gordon, riding alongside Cain, declared that they would support Fernand's withdrawal. He then instructed Selvia and Lancelot to go ahead into the forest and establish a stronghold. Far from the battlefield, Elise, her eyes wide with shock and concern, cried out Cain's name, wishing him good fortune in battle. Back on the field, Gordon, still riding, expressed his frustration, stating that if the enemy commander was targeting him, he would simply become a decoy. Cain, unmasked and visibly distressed, let out a desperate cry, lamenting the dire situation. He continued to lament his misfortune, questioning why he, of all people, had to endure such a terrible fate. Explosions erupted around him as the undead pressed their attack. The skeletal horde relentlessly pursued them into the night, their numbers seemingly endless. Gordon, still on horseback, questioned Fernand about how they would manage to regroup with the main force after being separated. Cain, now visibly exhausted and panting, realized with a jolt that he had completely used up all his reinforcement recovery potions. He had not anticipated such a prolonged and intense battle. Still riding, Cain continued to express his dismay, complaining that he had planned to sleep with a maid tonight, not camp out in a monster-infested forest. Gordon, riding nearby, questioned why he had brought such a person from the Archibald household to a battlefield. Suddenly, Cain's eyes widened in surprise as he noticed something amidst the dense foliage of the forest. He turned his head, his gaze fixed on the pursuing undead and his allies, a new realization dawning upon him as he observed the gypsophila flowers blooming in the forest. He continued his desperate retreat through the sparkling, monster-infested forest, riding alongside another armored soldier. The soldier, looking back at him with wide eyes, exclaimed in surprise, asking what was happening to Cain. Moments later, he reached up and began to remove his helmet, his face flushed and his eyes wide with a mix of surprise and resolute determination.